Hey guys, welcome back to Boring History to Sleep. Tonight we slip into something mysterious, tangled in script no one can read, with illustrations from a fever dream. A place where plants have extra limbs, bathing women float in green goo, and the zodiac has a couple of gaps. It's time to unravel, or gently tangle deeper into, the story of the Voynich Manuscript. This is boring history for sleep, and it's gloriously unreadable. You've probably heard of lost languages and secret codes, maybe even cursed books, right? But this one's a real curveball. It's a 240-page vellum manuscript, written in an unknown script and illustrated with oddball plants, naked bathers, and astronomical charts that seem to laugh in Latin's face. This thing has stumped professional codebreakers, monks, linguists, even the AI crowd. Honestly, you probably won't survive this whole story awake. Before you settle in, take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe, only if you really appreciate the content I share. And drop your location and local time in the comments, just because I'm endlessly curious who's drifting off across the globe tonight. Alright, time to lower the lights, maybe a fan on for that quiet background hum, and together we'll settle into tonight's adventure. So, picture it, Italy, 1912. Wilfrid Voynich, a rare book dealer with a flair for drama and a mustache that probably whispered secrets, is browsing through a chest of forgotten texts at the Villa Mondragone near Rome. The villa, once a Jesuit college, had been quietly selling off some dusty contents to raise money. Among the Latin treatises, he finds something off, a manuscript bound in limp vellum with faded ink and looping script that doesn't look like any known language. It's a scribbled daydream, the kind of book that might cause an exorcist to sigh. The writing is consistent, spaced, patterned, even neat. That's the kicker. It's not gibberish scribbled by a bored monk in wine-soaked isolation. It looks intentional, but no one can read it. Voynich flips through, page after page, illustrations tease meaning. A root that looks like a cross between a carrot and a scorpion. Circular diagrams with moons and stars and what may or may not be a womb with a pipe attached. Medieval art often looks odd to modern eyes, but this was different. Wilfrid, ever the entrepreneur, thinks he's hit the jackpot. He wonders, could this be the lost work of Roger Bacon, the 13th century English philosopher and proto-scientist? Bacon was into optics, ciphers, alchemy, the usual wizard starter pack. If this was Bacon's lost codex, it could be worth a fortune. Wilfrid hauls the manuscript back to London like a pirate with buried treasure. Soon, he's dropping hints to collectors and scholars. But here's the twist. Despite decades of decoding attempts, no one can even confirm what language it's in. Some historians argue whether Voynich genuinely discovered the manuscript, or if he was planting a forgery. A few suggest the entire thing might have been created in the early 20th century to fool the academic elite. But this theory loses steam in 2009, when radiocarbon dating slaps a "made between 1404 and 1438" label on the manuscript's parchment. Authentic parchment, yes, but the ink? Unverified, like getting a 15th century paper with a modern doodle of SpongeBob. Weirdly enough, the manuscript's earliest confirmed owner might be Georg Baresch, a 17th century Prague alchemist who sent a sample to Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher, hoping he could decipher it. Kircher, an expert in everything from Egyptian hieroglyphs to why volcanoes belch, never managed to decode it, but he did file it away, hence why it eventually ended up in the Jesuit collection where Voynich found it. And still today, no one knows who wrote it, where exactly it was made, or what it's supposed to say. Some speculate it's a medical compendium, others insist it's an alchemical text for mystical healing. A smaller group is convinced it's just very elaborate nonsense, an old-timey prank. The script, dubbed Voynichise, remains unique. It has no clear roots in Latin, Greek, Arabic, or any known linguistic family. There are no punctuation marks, and while it flows left to right, there are some suspiciously repetitive patterns. You know that feeling when someone sends you a long text with no punctuation and you're not sure if they're mad or just in a rush? That's the whole book. But here's where things take a turn toward the wonderfully absurd. Some of the plant drawings, if you squint and tilt your head like you're trying to read upside down IKEA instructions, kind of resemble real flora. One flower looks vaguely like a sunflower, crossed with an egg whisk. Another resembles something you'd pull from the bottom of your fridge and throw away quickly before it learns to walk. And it's this strangeness that has kept the manuscript alive, not in translation, but in obsession. Scholars, hobbyists, and internet sleuths pore over scans late at night. Linguists use statistical models to examine word frequency. AI tries deep learning. Even amateur cryptographers bring out code wheels, convinced they'll find that one key no one else has tried. So far, nada. No cipher has unlocked its secrets. No code has cracked its patterns. The Voynich laughs in the face of logic. It's tempting to imagine a scenario where some eccentric genius sat down in the 15th century with fresh vellum and a head full of dreams and decided to invent an entire alphabet, language, and herbal medicine practice just for fun. Like a medieval Tolkien, minus the orcs, plus way more baths. And yet, something about the manuscript feels too orderly to be random. Historians still argue whether the consistent patterns in Voynich suggest a real, structured language, or if it's a hoax built with careful repetition to mimic language, a statistical fluke, or a brilliant con. Meanwhile, the manuscript sits quietly at Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library, under glass behind climate control, watched by sleepy grad students and curious tourists. It's probably never been so misunderstood yet so thoroughly admired. People flock to its mystery, not because they expect answers, but because, in a world of Wikipedia and deep dives, it refuses to give up its secrets. It's the literary equivalent of a cat that sits just out of reach and blinks slowly while you try to decode its expression. And so begins the long, sleepy trail through one of history's most confusing artifacts. Whether it's medieval science, a 20th century hoax, or just a particularly artsy way to waste vellum, the Voynich manuscript is here. Silent, unreadable, and absolutely fascinating, just slow enough for boring history to sleep. Wilfrid Voynich is many things: book dealer, rebel exile, maybe part-time wizard. Born in 1865 in what is now Lithuania, he spends his early adult years doing very unboring things like smuggling revolutionary pamphlets and escaping from Siberian exile by pretending to be someone else entirely. After a whirlwind of hiding, fleeing, and probably never getting a good night's sleep, he lands in London and somehow shifts from political renegade to antique book merchant. A pretty solid pivot, honestly. By the time he stumbles upon the infamous manuscript at the Villa Mondragone in 912, Wilfrid's reputation is well established. He's known for sniffing out rare treasures, especially anything with a hint of mystery or prestige. That's why when he finds this weirdly illustrated, unreadable book tucked away in a collection that used to belong to Athanasius Kircher, his instincts go full treasure hunter. He immediately suspects, hopes really, that it's the long-lost work of the 13th century English monk scientist Roger Bacon. He spends the next several years obsessively trying to prove it. But there's a lingering question, one that's stuck to the manuscript like centuries-old glue. Was Voynich duped, or did he do the duping? See, some scholars think Wilfrid was a bit too dramatic. He spun tales of how the manuscript's origins were soaked in secrecy, and that it had been deliberately hidden by Jesuits for centuries. It would make an incredible story, if you weren't holding a manuscript that might have just been a weird doodle notebook. Here's where it gets eyebrow-raising. Voynich only produced one handwritten letter, claiming the manuscript's provenance, dated 1665 and allegedly from a Prague alchemist named Johannes Marcus Marci. It's supposed to accompany the manuscript and mentions that it was sent to Athanasius Kircher for translation. This single piece of paper is treated like the manuscript's birth certificate, but it's also the only clue linking it to any historical figure. The letter seems authentic, yes, but some think it was planted. And Voynich, well, he did have access to blank vellum. He had motive, fame, money, that intoxicating whiff of academic immortality. Some modern skeptics claim he might have used old vellum to create a fake, medieval book, fresh ink on ancient parchment. But if so, he played it too straight. No flashy Illuminati symbols, no mention of buried gold, no dragon map. Just weird plants and bathtub ladies. Historians still argue whether Voynich could have produced such an elaborate forgery without help, or if someone earlier had already crafted this thing, and he just lucked out by rediscovering it. After all, if you were going to forge something, wouldn't you write it in Latin, toss in a few saint names, maybe a crown or two? This thing feels intentionally obscure. Let's talk logistics. Forging a book like this would require 1. Access to 15th century vellum. 2. Ink aged convincingly enough to fool chemical analysis, though ink testing wasn't reliable until the 20th century. 3. A made-up script that's internally consistent across 240 pages. 4. Drawings strange enough to seem otherworldly, but not so bad they scream modern fake. That's a tall order for anyone, even an ambitious dealer with a flair for mystery. And yet, the conspiracy theories persist. Some even argue that Voynich wasn't working alone. Maybe a collaborator helped him invent the script. Perhaps he stumbled upon the parchment but added the script himself. One delicious theory suggests he bought blank vellum, wrote in his own cipher system, and inserted the fake Marcy letter for plausible history. If that's true, he played the long con with a monk's patience. But here's a mainstream historical fact that tilts the scale. After Voynich's death in 1930, the manuscript passed to his widow, Ethel, who never sold it. If it were a forgery, surely someone would have tried to cash in. Instead, she clung to it. Maybe it was sentimental, maybe she believed in it, or maybe even she wasn't totally sure what she had. It's worth noting Ethel herself was an interesting character, a former actress and daughter of author George Boole. Yes, that Boole of Boolean logic. She spent her later years fiercely defending the manuscript's authenticity, which makes it either the world's longest improv or a sincere belief in its importance. Here's where it gets quirky. One fringe theory claims that Voynich didn't forge it himself, but uncovered a prank played centuries earlier by someone like Edward Kelly or John Dee, Elizabethan mystics who dabbled in angel languages and magical scribbles. The idea is that they concocted the manuscript to impress royal patrons or sell the illusion of hidden knowledge. If that were true, then Voynich simply found their joke centuries later and mistook it for real treasure. Others, more grounded, point out that Voynich was a known bibliophile who loved the mystique of rare books. Even if the manuscript were fake, it's very likely he believed in its authenticity. He spared no effort in presenting it to academics, codebreakers, and museums. He even kept it locked in a bank vault for a time, as if protecting a sleeping dragon. Modern investigations haven't found any clear evidence that he forged it. Radiocarbon dating proves the pages are 15th century. Ink testing remains inconclusive, and stylistic analysis hasn't turned up anything definitive. It's like every attempt to dig up a forgery just leads to more questions. In the end, Wilfrid Voynich disappears from history the same way he arrived, dramatically. His discovery becomes his legacy, and his name forever linked to one of the strangest books ever found. Whether he was a master forger or just really good at finding confusing objects is still debated, often late at night by people in very large glasses. But he set the stage. His discovery launched a century-long treasure hunt that, to this day, has produced more theories than answers. One thing's for sure, Wilfrid had good taste in mysteries. And somewhere in a shadowy corner of a library in 1912, there's a moment when he flips that first page, raises an eyebrow, and probably whispers, "What the hell is this?" And the manuscript, unknowable, slightly smug, whispers back, "Exactly." The first thing anyone notices when opening the Voynich manuscript is the plants. Pages and pages of plant illustrations, each with roots, stems, leaves, and flowers, except none of them actually seem to exist. Imagine a medieval field guide to alien botany. That's the vibe. The manuscript starts with what scholars call the herbal section. It's a term that generously assumes these things are herbs. The illustrations fill nearly every page, one or two per leaf, with accompanying paragraphs in the same looping, unreadable script. The layout feels like an old medical text. Picture a medieval version of WebMD with doodles. But these aren't your garden variety tulips or chamomile. They're hybrid creatures. One looks like an artichoke had an identity crisis infused with a jellyfish. Another has roots that look suspiciously like human intestines. If you flip through this thing too fast, you'd think you were reading a field guide to plants that sprouted on a different planet. Here's the mainstream historical fact. During the 15th and 16th centuries, herbal manuscripts were common in Europe. They often included detailed images of plants used for healing, sometimes with commentary on how to apply them to everything from headaches to demonic possession. These guides were serious medical resources, but they also had their quirks. Medieval illustrators weren't always accurate, and sometimes they copied from other books without ever seeing the real plants. This explains why even real medieval herbals sometimes contain plants that look like parsley drawn by a toddler. But the Voynich illustrations go beyond mere stylization. They're consistent in their weirdness. The roots alone deserve their own exhibition. Some twist like Celtic knots, others sprawl across the page like they're trying to escape. Historians still argue whether the botanical drawings were ever meant to represent real plants at all, or whether they're symbolic, meant to stand for medical ideas, astrological principles, or secret knowledge passed through images rather than words. A fringe theory suggests the artist might have been inventing plants on purpose, either for fun or as part of a code. If you can't write openly about a cure, maybe you make up a plant to disguise it, like drawing a tomato and calling it sky fruit so no one catches on. It's a weird way to do medicine, but hey, it was the Middle Ages. Let's pause for one sleepy joke here. If one of these root systems ever started moving, honestly, no one would be surprised. Half the plants in this manuscript look like they'd hiss at you if you touched them. Some brave botanists have tried to identify these plants. Over the years, there have been attempts to match certain drawings to known species. Hey, that one looks kind of like a passion flower. Or maybe this is a stylized version of sage. These efforts usually lead to one of three conclusions. 1. The identification seems plausible but unprovable. 2. The plant looks vaguely like something, but with key parts rearranged like a botanical Mr. Potato Head. 3. The drawing matches nothing on Earth, but does bear an eerie resemblance to a sea creature with anxiety. And here's where things get extra cozy strange. The style of these illustrations doesn't match other manuscripts from the same era. Not quite. It's almost like someone learned to draw from looking at medical books, but then went rogue. A few leaves are colored in, often using green, brown, yellow, simple pigments available at the time. The coloring's not uniform, and some pages seem half-finished. One theory is that it was meant to be a working draft, an early version of a bigger, more polished book. Another suggests the artist just got bored halfway through, which, frankly, we respect. One particularly intriguing page shows a plant with a circular blossom split like a pinwheel. Its roots branch out like river deltas, curling at the ends as though someone told them they were late for an art exhibit. There's a paragraph of Voynichese beneath it, impenetrable as always. But you get the feeling this was meant to mean something. The care, the repetition, the order, it doesn't scream prank. It whispers obsession. And still, the book remains mute. No plant has been definitively matched. No accompanying paragraph has been translated. If this was medicine, it's a pharmacy with no labels. If it's alchemy, it's like someone shredded the cookbook and taped it back together using a cipher. Then, there's a quirky historical tidbit worth mentioning. One 1940s scholar tried to argue that the plants were real, just extremely rare hybrids that once grew in a secret monastery garden, like a lost botanical Eden. According to him, monks were crossbreeding flora to create miraculous cures and encoded their notes to prevent outsiders from stealing the recipes. Is it plausible? Not really. Is it fun to imagine? Absolutely. But as time went on, the frustration mounted. By the 1960s, most mainstream botanists had abandoned any hope of plant identification. The drawings weren't reliable enough. No scale, no labels, no consistent anatomy, like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where every piece might belong to a different box. A few hopeful hobbyists still try, matching parts of leaves to tropical plants, desert herbs, or even prehistoric species. One guy in the 1990s insisted the plants came from South America, long before Europeans supposedly made it there. Another suggested the shapes were based on fungi rather than flowers. You know, things are getting weird when mushrooms start sounding like the logical explanation. So where does that leave us? With pages full of impossibly drawn plants, described in an unbroken stream of unreadable text, looking for all the world like they're trying to tell us something, and yet refusing to do so. The Voynich Manuscript doesn't meet you halfway. It stands there, leafy arms folded, smiling slightly like it knows something you don't. Maybe it's just a 15th century doodle book, made by someone very lonely and very imaginative. Or maybe it's a hidden language of plants that only reveals itself under moonlight, and dreams. For now, the herbal section remains a gentle green puzzle. Something about it feels familiar: roots, stems, leaves, but just different enough to feel like you're trying to remember a dream from the night before. A dream that slips away, leaf by leaf, as you drift further into the Voynich's leafy labyrinth. After pages of alien plants and their twisted root systems, the Voynich Manuscript takes a sudsy detour. Suddenly, instead of botany, you're in what can only be described as a medieval bathhouse fever dream. This is the balneological section, for those who like their fancy words with extra bubbles. The pages shift from greenery to gatherings of naked female figures, often plump, almost always unclothed, bathing, lounging, or frolicking in what looks like green-blue liquid, winding through bizarre networks of pipes, tubs, and organic-looking vessels. Think Roman baths, drawn by someone who had only heard about plumbing in a dream. The nymphs are everywhere. Some wade waist-deep in circular tubs. Others stand in long chains connected by tubes that wind like intestines. A few seem to hold stars, and more than once there's a look of mild concern on their faces, maybe because the plumbing resembles the inside of a mechanical squid. It's as if someone took a Renaissance medical diagram, mashed it up with a water park brochure, and filtered it through a kaleidoscope. And the manuscript doesn't explain any of it. There's no step 1, add salt. Step 2, immerse thyself. Just the Voynichese script looping calmly along, as if this scene makes perfect sense. Mainstream historians think this section might represent balneotherapy, an old-school form of healing involving mineral baths, popular in medieval and Renaissance Europe. Public bathhouses weren't just for scrubbing your elbows. They were social, spiritual, sometimes even sacred places. It's not unthinkable that a manuscript might detail the therapeutic benefits of different baths, water temperatures, or magical healing rituals involving lunar energy and giggling nude sprites. But there's no clear geography, no maps, no named rivers or mineral springs, just bizarrely consistent illustrations of women in tubs, holding rings, stars, orbs. The repetition is unnerving. Page after page, the same basic shapes. A figure, a pool, some mysterious tube or green ooze. It's like a medieval IKEA manual for a spa machine that may or may not also double as a time portal. And that green liquid? It's everywhere. Winding around diagrams, connecting the tubs, filling containers. Some think it represents water. Others say it's a stand-in for bodily fluids, or maybe alchemical substances. There's one fringe theory that it's not liquid at all, but energy. The nymphs aren't bathing, they're channeling, healing, absorbing cosmic juice, or maybe just enjoying a soak while the stars align. Let's not skip over the tubes. Oh, the tubes. They twist across pages like noodles in an underground labyrinth. Some scholars suggest they mimic parts of human anatomy, fallopian tubes, intestines, blood vessels. That would tie this section to women's health or reproductive science. Others argue it's symbolic, representing lifelines, connections, energy paths. Then again, it might just be what happens when you let your pen go for a walk with no supervision. Historians still argue whether this section represents real-world healing rituals or metaphorical, possibly spiritual processes. Maybe it's about rejuvenation, maybe it's about fertility, maybe it's about plumbing, or maybe, and here's a very real theory, the bathing women are stars. Celestial nymphs, personifications of constellations, bathing in cosmic rivers. After all, some of the tubs are ringed by what look like zodiac signs, little suns and moons peeking around the edges. There's even one page where a woman rises from a tub, holding what appears to be an elaborate crown or antenna. A celestial diva mid-bath, a goddess of hot springs, or just someone who took her tiara to the spa. Here's a quirky fringe tidbit. One researcher in the 1970s claimed that these figures were all pregnant, every single one. According to him, the baths were prenatal or related to some lost knowledge of childbirth. He argued that the tubes were umbilical in nature, and that the stars in the margins reflected astrological timing for fertility and delivery. Critics gently suggested he might have been seeing what he wanted to see, but still, the idea stuck in some circles. On the weirder end of the spectrum, there's the ancient alien crowd. You knew they'd show up eventually. They believe these bathing scenes depict extraterrestrial visitors using advanced biofluid chambers for interstellar healing. Yes, seriously. Apparently, when in Rome, aliens too enjoy a good soak. But even without space visitors, it's hard not to feel something unearthly about these pages. The repetition of forms, the identical faces, the serenity. It's strangely soothing, like watching a parade of dream sequences. You don't know what's happening, but it doesn't feel threatening, just weirdly specific and gentle, like the manuscript is whispering, "Shh, it's bath time now." One mainstream comparison draws parallels to medieval gynecological texts, which sometimes used abstract imagery to represent conception, wombs, and fertility. Some had diagrams with women seated in unusual postures or odd anatomical pathways drawn in symbolic loops. It's possible the Voynich illustrations were drawn in that same tradition, but pushed way further into abstraction. There's also the issue of repetition. The bathing women appear so often in such similar poses that many believe they're not meant to represent individuals, but concepts. Maybe they're days of a lunar calendar, maybe they represent stages of life, or emotional states, or maybe someone just really enjoyed drawing nudes in an age when such hobbies had to be disguised as science. Whatever the truth, this section is one of the most discussed and most debated parts of the manuscript. It feels deeply symbolic, like it's trying to communicate a pattern or process just out of reach. The water flows, the women stand, the stars watch quietly. And while the plants had an alien logic to them, the bath scenes have an emotional undercurrent. They feel communal, cyclical, almost ritualistic, like we're watching a sacred process unfold. If only we could read the captions, but we can't, so we float along, soaking in the mystery, a procession of inked women, forever bathing, forever unexplained. The manuscript moves forward, never looking back, and as you blink slowly, watching those nymphs wade through strange waters, you start to feel the pull of their rhythm, gentle, repetitive, unanswerable. Exactly the kind of boring history for sleep we came here for. The bathing women begin to fade from the pages, leaving behind only their softly curved pipes and starry orbs. In their place, wheels begin to turn, literally. What follows in the Voynich manuscript is a series of circular diagrams, detailed and deliberate, like someone drew astrology charts with their eyes closed, but their pen moving with full confidence. This part of the manuscript is often called the astronomical or astrological section, depending on how generous you're feeling with terminology, and your belief in starlight dictating your Tuesday. The drawings look like zodiac charts at first glance. Concentric circles, radiating spokes, decorative flourishes, but soon something feels off. You expect familiar star signs, Aries, Taurus, Leo, but then you notice something's missing. Pisces? Not here. Aquarius? Nowhere to be found. Two zodiac signs are simply absent. Historians still argue whether this omission is intentional, accidental, or symbolic. Either way, it's weird. It's like showing up to a party and realizing two of the guests just disappeared from the invite list. Most of the zodiac-like charts are surrounded by, you guessed it, more women. This time, they're clothed, mostly. And instead of splashing around in green bathwater, they're hanging out inside little medallions or standing beside stars. Each figure represents a day, or perhaps a celestial influence. In one circular diagram, there are 30 women, each holding a star-shaped symbol and circling around what might be a sun. Their faces are all calm, uniform, echoing the spa nymphs, but now with more cosmic job duties. Some of the signs are clearly labeled. Cancer features a very respectable crab. Sagittarius is depicted as a centaur archer, though his form is a little rough, like someone had to draw it quickly before the horse part wiggled away. But then it falls apart. Gemini looks more like an awkward pair of twins conjoined at a sentence. Libra, normally the scales, appears as something that could pass for a coat rack. And remember, Pisces and Aquarius? Gone. Not even a watery echo. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Astrological manuscripts were extremely popular in the medieval period. People genuinely believed celestial positions affected health, temperament, and even the best time to trim your hair. There were zodiac man calendars, astrological medicine charts, and entire treatments based on your moon sign. It wasn't mystical fluff, it was seen as science. Physicians carried zodiac guides the way modern doctors carry stethoscopes. That context adds a layer of plausibility to this section. Maybe the author was creating their own astrological system. Maybe they saw something flawed in the zodiac as it stood. Or maybe they were just reorganizing it in a way only they could understand, the way one might relabel a spice rack by vibe alone. Here's a quirk for your sleepy thoughts. One of the zodiac charts includes 29 women in stars instead of 30 or 31. Some believe this indicates a lunar calendar was being followed, perhaps even a personal or cultural one no longer in use. Maybe the missing signs weren't forgotten. Maybe they didn't exist in the author's framework. A zodiac from another system, another worldview, or another planet. Yes, that theory exists too. Alien zodiacs. Let's not dwell too long. The stars and circles in this section feel purposeful. They hum with a kind of order, even if we don't know the tune. Some diagrams are centered by floral shapes, others by suns, moons, or little flames, and wrapped around them all are those delicate, unreadable words, looping like whispered secrets around a carousel of constellations. A few scholars think the circular layouts are not zodiacs at all, but calendar wheels. Medieval calendars were sometimes illustrated with symbols for each month and activities appropriate to the season: harvesting, feasting, freezing in uncomfortable robes. But again, we can't read the accompanying text, so maybe that figure surrounded by 30 women with stars isn't a zodiac at all. Maybe it's a menstrual calendar, or a record of celestial events, or, according to one enthusiast, a map of the soul's journey through different astral phases. We can't rule it out. What we can say is this: the section plays with cycles, moons, months, perhaps even moods. And while there's a vague sense of time passing, nothing is labeled in any known calendar format. No months like March or August, no numbers, no helpful little "you are here" celestial markers. Just stars and women in wheels. There's also something deeply tactile about these drawings. They're not perfect, but they're committed. Whoever made them believed in their purpose. The lines are smooth, the stars deliberate, the layout consistent across pages. The author didn't hesitate. Whether they were copying from a known system, creating their own, or channeling knowledge from somewhere else, they believed in it. One particularly odd diagram features a series of stars orbiting what appears to be a central blob. Some have interpreted this as a model of the solar system, though its structure doesn't match Ptolemaic or Copernican models. One fringe theory suggests it's a memory wheel, a type of medieval mnemonic device meant to train the mind by associating visual symbols with ideas or phrases. If true, it means the manuscript might have been a learning tool for someone very, very patient. The signs of Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and Sagittarius appear most frequently in these illustrations, leading some to theorize they were particularly important, either to the scribe or the manuscript's original owner. Or maybe, as one scholar joked, it was just their favorite season. Summer nymphs and centaurs only, please. But while the stars twinkle from the page, they don't light a clear path. They remain interpretive, mysterious, like someone left you a personalized horoscope that requires 3 PhDs and an exorcism to read. If the herbal section was rooted in earth, this one floats just above it, spinning gently in symbolic space. A dream of time, stars, and ritual, wheels turning with no clear start or end. And the absence of Pisces and Aquarius hangs like a question mark in a celestial sky that never quite makes sense. But isn't that what makes it oddly perfect for this sleepy journey? You can stare at the circles, the tiny figures, the missing signs, and drift. The Voynich doesn't answer, it just continues. The wheels stop spinning, the stars fade out like distant candlelight. And just when your brain has started adjusting to medieval astrology, drawn by someone possibly upside down, the Voynich Manuscript takes another sudden swerve into what scholars have dubbed the pharmaceutical section. But don't expect neat recipes or measurements. This isn't a medieval cookbook or even a wizard's pantry log. It's more like the chaotic middle drawer in your grandma's kitchen, filled with mystery roots, half-bottled tinctures, and labels that read like your cat walked across the keyboard. These pages are packed. Small, dense paragraphs of Voynichese cover much of the vellum, broken up by frequent drawings of, you guessed it, strange root systems, bulbous jars, and abstract plant parts. If the herbal section was nature in full bloom, this is that same nature picked apart, boiled down and stuffed in a bottle. Some call it the recipes section, but the word recipe here is used as loosely as medieval monks used spelling. Each paragraph seems to begin with a star-shaped bullet point, followed by lines of unreadable script. If this is a collection of recipes, it's one where the ingredients are invisible, the cooking times are encoded, and the serving sizes are probably nonsense. If Gordon Ramsay tried to cook from this, he'd be screaming into a cauldron by page 3. And yet, there's structure, there's rhythm. The star-like markers suggest a list format. Some paragraphs are short, like instructions for a quick potion. Others span the page like magical novellas. Each seems deliberately written, not random scribbles, not filler, something meant to be preserved. Mainstream historians point out that recipe books were a key part of early medicine. Physicians and herbalists kept handwritten instructions for making balms, ointments, teas, and tonics, often passed down from generation to generation. These recipes were often personalized, half practical knowledge, half superstition, and sometimes a whole lot of guesswork. 1 part crushed snail, 2 parts powdered emerald, and chant softly to the moon. You know, science. The Voynich's version, though, no recognizable herbs, no Latin names, no helpful diagrams of application, just roots drawn like spaghetti with stage fright and pages full of looping script that continues to defy translation. Let's talk about those jars. Repeatedly, the manuscript shows elaborate containers, narrow-necked, wide-bottomed, some with what look like ribbed tops or handles. They're drawn almost reverently, standing in rows like little soldiers on a pharmacist's shelf. Some have caps, others appear open. The style varies slightly from page to page, but the theme remains: containers. And not just any containers, these are important vessels. Sacred, maybe, or just really fancy thermoses. One quirky fringe theory suggests these jars aren't for storing medicine at all, but for containing elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Each vessel, then, becomes a miniature cosmos. It's a poetic idea, even if it's entirely unprovable. Then again, what isn't unprovable in this book? One jar in particular has drawn attention. It's tall, narrow, with 2 ear-like loops on either side, and decorated with wavy lines. Some say it resembles Middle Eastern alchemical flasks. Others argue it's just a stylized cooking pot. If nothing else, it's comforting to know that 400 years later, we're still trying to figure out whether something is a laboratory tool or a kitchen gadget. Now back to the recipes themselves, if they are recipes. Some linguists have analyzed the structure of the text and found statistical patterns similar to real human languages. Word frequencies, repetition of prefixes and suffixes, sentence-like formatting. It behaves like language, but no known tongue matches it, and no Rosetta Stone has ever been found. Historians still argue whether the recipes section is encoded medical instruction, a disguised form of communication between a secret society, or just elaborate scribbles intended to look meaningful. One theory even proposes that the entire manuscript is written in a kind of constructed language, a personal linguistic system built by one obsessive individual, complete with vocabulary, grammar, and rules. Think Tolkien's Elvish, but with more root vegetables and fewer elves. There's also the theory of glossolalia, automatic writing often linked to trance states. Could the author have written these sections under some kind of mystical or meditative condition? The looping rhythm, the endless repetition, it does read like the written version of a chant. Not meaningful in the logical sense, but emotionally or spiritually resonant to the scribe. And yet, the consistency of structure across pages and the use of bullet points and paragraph breaks makes it feel too methodical for pure trance writing. More like someone was documenting something very real, very important. To them, anyway. You might also notice the aesthetic pleasure in this part of the book. The lines are precise. The jars, while varied, are elegant. The text flows with purpose. Even without understanding a single word, the pages give the impression of confidence, like whoever wrote this knew exactly what they were doing and didn't need you to understand it. One particularly puzzling page features a drawing of what appears to be a chopped root, floating above a jar with 4 connected tubes. Is it a distillation setup? A metaphor for a digestive system? Or just what happens when a root wants a hat? Sleepy joke incoming. If this really is a medieval medicine book, then somewhere, Someone was out there trying to cure the plague with basil, swamp water, and the power of unreadable cursive. And honestly, that's not the worst idea from that century. Whatever the true function of these entries, they feel like the beating heart of the manuscript, less whimsical than the nymphs, less cosmic than the star charts. This is the workbench, the cabinet, the scrolls you pull out when someone has a cough or a curse. And even if you can't read them, it's not hard to imagine some ancient hand reaching for this book late at night, fingers stained with herbal resin, turning to a dog-eared page to find the right sequence of characters for something. A cure, a charm, a sleeping draft. Whatever the case, this section settles into repetition. Page after page of recipes, star-bulleted, root-heavy, quiet, the rhythm of forgotten instruction, the slow churn of mystery preserved in ink. And the jars, still standing, patient, labeled in a language no one speaks, waiting. As the manuscript delves deeper into its pharmaceutical mysteries, it begins to introduce something both puzzling and somehow familiar, the language itself. This elusive script, known as Voynich, is a consistent and intricate cipher, except it's not a cipher at all. It's a language that no one can decode. It's as if the manuscript was penned in a script designed to confuse and mystify, holding on to its secrets like an ancient lock without a key. The script is unlike any language on Earth, at least based on the known linguistic families. There's no clear connection to Latin, Greek, Hebrew, or Arabic, the usual suspects when it comes to medieval texts. It isn't a simple substitution cipher either, as it doesn't show the irregularities you'd expect from such systems. It's too uniform, too well formed, and therein lies the mystery. Linguists have spent decades attempting to crack the code. Statistical analyses of the letter frequencies, the way characters repeat, the patterns of word formations. These methods often reveal one thing: a language that behaves as if it's real. In fact, some experts have claimed that the Voynich script is too regular, too structured to be a random jumble. It feels like an actual language, but one that no one has ever encountered. Historians still argue whether this strange script is an actual language at all, or just an elaborate hoax. Could the author have designed this entirely new language simply to confuse anyone who came across the manuscript? It seems almost too sophisticated for a prank. Yet, the consistent patterns, like loops, word endings, and sentence structures, suggest it isn't nonsense. No one would take the time to create such a detailed fake language without purpose, right? There's also the fact that this script doesn't resemble any medieval alphabet, even the less common ones. Some scholars have proposed that it could be a constructed language from an obscure culture, one that might have had its own linguistic traditions lost to history. This idea suggests that the manuscript could represent the last remnants of a forgotten civilization or the work of a lone scholar who preserved an ancient language from a distant culture. But let's take a step back and examine the situation with the eyes of a 15th century scholar. Imagine you're working at your desk in some dusty European monastery. You have the tools, a quill, ink, and parchment, and you've studied languages and scripts of the ancient world. But what if you wanted to write down something secret, something no one could read, something that could survive the ages and keep its contents hidden from prying eyes? What if the manuscript is a product of such a mind? An individual who sought to preserve knowledge in a language that no one could crack, ensuring its protection from the church or the state. This is one of the more romantic theories surrounding the manuscript's creation. Perhaps the author was a scholar, a physician, or even a mystic, someone who wanted to protect knowledge of an alchemical or herbal nature. The Voynich script could have been their safeguard, an ingenious invention designed to protect sensitive information from outsiders. After all, the manuscript is filled with symbols of nature, healing, and mysterious ingredients, things that might have been considered dangerous or heretical in certain periods. But here's the twist: if it is a hoax, it's the most elaborate one in history. Creating a completely new script, designing a text that mimics the behavior of real languages while still remaining totally unreadable. That's a monumental task. Some critics argue that it's all a ploy, a medieval prank. Maybe the author had too much time on their hands, or was trying to impress a rich patron with their ability to create a language. A hoax that was meant to be deciphered later, but never was. If that's the case, they were incredibly ahead of their time. Of course, some theories go even further into the fringe. Could the Voynich script be some sort of divine language? A lost tongue spoken by ancient civilizations or even extraterrestrial beings? Imagine this: aliens visiting Earth in the medieval period, sharing their wisdom in a language that, thousands of years later, would be found in the form of this manuscript. It's the kind of idea that sounds preposterous, but the manuscript's refusal to yield its secrets has left many open to such possibilities. It's as if the manuscript itself is playing with history, challenging scholars and curious minds to keep guessing. For the majority of researchers, though, the mystery lies in the script's regularity and coherence. One of the major reasons it resists translation is that it appears to follow grammatical rules. There's a rhythm to it, a syntax. In some ways, the script resembles languages that were developed specifically to encode knowledge, like medieval alchemical texts or codes used by secret societies. In those cases, scholars would write in deliberately obscure or symbolic languages to obscure their true meaning from the uninitiated. Could the Voynich be one such code? Possibly, but if so, what's the key to unlocking it? Here's where things get really interesting. Advances in technology and computer science have breathed new life into the search for answers. In recent decades, artificial intelligence and machine learning have been brought into the fray. Algorithms have scanned the entire manuscript, searching for patterns, breaking down the structure, analyzing the frequency of symbols and their combinations. The results are fascinating, but of course still inconclusive. One AI-driven theory suggests that Voynich isn't a true language at all, but rather an artificially generated structure designed to mimic natural languages. This would explain the regularities to an apparent syntax. However, this doesn't explain why it appears so convincingly like a real language that every human attempt to decipher it has failed. Could the manuscript have been created with such an advanced knowledge of linguistics that it outpaces even modern computing power? It's a tantalizing thought. The Voynich manuscript's language, whatever it is, continues to be a major point of fascination, a symbol of linguistic enigma that resists all attempts to crack its code. Its script has now become a legend in its own right, offering up tantalizing fragments of meaning, but never the whole picture. It teases those who try to unlock it, offering a glimpse into a world of forgotten knowledge, if only they could read the writing. As for the manuscript itself, it holds onto its secrets with a serene confidence. The script is still unreadable, and yet, somehow, that's part of its allure. Like an unspoken promise that maybe one day someone will finally understand. But until then, it remains a mysterious relic, a beautiful, unreadable text from the past, suspended in time and history, just beyond our grasp. Despite its beauty and intricate design, the Voynich manuscript doesn't just sit in a vacuum. It's been the subject of countless attempts to decode, unlock, and understand its meaning. The history of decoding the manuscript is as twisted as the script itself. Over the years, the manuscript has passed through the hands of various codebreakers, cryptographers, and scientists, each with their own approach to cracking the mysterious text. Yet, all have failed. Let's start with the most famous attempt. During World War II, a team of cryptographers in the United States and Britain took a swing at the Voynich manuscript. They were some of the brightest minds of their time, capable of cracking complex ciphers and code systems. If anyone could break this thing, they could. But even with all the resources at their disposal, even with the finest cryptographers working on it, the manuscript remained a mystery. It was frustrating, it was maddening, and it was unsolvable. Historians still argue whether this failure to crack the code is a testament to the complexity of the manuscript or a reflection of something even stranger, that the manuscript's text doesn't encode anything at all. That's a bold idea, but it's one that has its proponents. Perhaps the text is deliberately nonsensical, and no cipher exists because there was nothing to decode in the first place. This would suggest that the manuscript is a hoax, a piece of medieval performance art, created simply to baffle and confuse, a great mystery for the ages that, at its heart, is just empty space. This theory, however, doesn't satisfy everyone. The regularity of the text, the repetition of words, phrases, and grammatical structures seems too deliberate to be meaningless. What's more, there are sections of the manuscript that seem to suggest intentional order. If this were a hoax, Why would someone go to such extraordinary lengths to create a text so consistent and complicated? It's a question that continues to haunt those who study the manuscript, like a ghost standing at the foot of an unbroken door. Enter the modern era, where the race to crack the code of the Voynich Manuscript shifted from the hands of cryptographers to the realm of digital tools. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computer-assisted pattern recognition have all been brought into play. One of the most recent attempts used AI to analyze the frequency of letter combinations in the manuscript, comparing them to languages known to mankind. Some breakthroughs occurred. The AI uncovered that the letter patterns in Voynichese appeared to follow similar frequency distributions to real languages. This was exciting, proof that the text was, indeed, designed to behave like a language, but the AI didn't offer any clear translations. One particularly fascinating attempt involved taking a small segment of the Voynich text and running it through a program designed to break ciphers by recognizing similarities to known languages. The result? The program flagged a few potential matches to certain obscure languages, ancient tongues, languages not widely spoken anymore, but there was no magic moment, no definitive aha, only tantalizing hints of possibility that ultimately lead nowhere. The use of AI to attempt a solution is part of a broader trend in modern cryptography and linguistics, using technology to crack codes that have long been beyond human reach. But the Voynich Manuscript, stubborn and unyielding, resists even these futuristic tools. It's as if the manuscript were created to survive the onslaught of centuries, technology, and even the sharpest minds. Theories about the manuscript's origins and purpose have also multiplied. Some claim it is a lost work of alchemical knowledge, containing recipes for creating the philosopher's stone, the mythical substance that can turn base metals into gold. Others suggest that the manuscript is a mystical text, a record of esoteric knowledge passed down by secret societies. Perhaps it contains hidden instructions for spiritual enlightenment, or an ancient ritual that must never be known to the uninitiated. Yet, even these theories feel like they are grasping at something intangible. If the manuscript is indeed a work of esoteric knowledge, then why hasn't anyone been able to translate it? Why does it remain an enigma even to the most brilliant minds? Some modern theorists argue that the manuscript is a relic of a lost civilization, an ancient culture whose language and symbols have been lost to time. This would explain why the text behaves like a language but doesn't match any known linguistic family. Could it be that the manuscript was written by a people whose knowledge was so advanced that it transcended the languages of their time? Could this manuscript be a final message from a civilization that was wiped out, with only their cryptic writing left to tantalize us? The idea of the manuscript being a piece of lost history is a compelling one, and it taps into the broader fascination with ancient civilizations. We're all drawn to the idea of a hidden, forgotten world, a place where knowledge was kept safe, where mysteries were guarded by the passage of time. Perhaps the Voynich Manuscript is a key to that lost world, waiting to be unlocked by a future generation with the tools and knowledge to decipher it. But here's the problem. After hundreds of years of investigation, no one can say for certain whether the manuscript is a genuine relic of the past or simply a clever medieval prank. And the longer it remains unsolved, the more it grows in myth and legend. The Voynich Manuscript becomes more than just a book. It becomes a symbol of the unknowable, a manifestation of our deepest desire to solve the mysteries that surround us. Yet, no matter how much we study it, no matter how many codebreakers, scholars, and AI programs pore over its pages, the Voynich Manuscript remains silent. It continues to mock us, its script unfathomable, its purpose elusive, and in a way, perhaps that's the manuscript's greatest secret, that the journey of trying to decipher it is as meaningful as the solution itself. The more we attempt to understand it, the more we engage with history, with language, and with the deep, unquenchable thirst for knowledge that has driven humanity for centuries. The manuscript may never give up its secrets, but in the process of searching, we find something greater, the thrill of the chase, the wonder of the unknown, and the humbling reminder that some mysteries might always remain just beyond our reach. After decades of failed attempts to decode the text, it's easy to wonder why the Voynich Manuscript still attracts so much attention. After all, it has no clear answers. There are no shining revelations, no treasure maps, no long-lost wisdom waiting to be rediscovered. Instead, we're left with a collection of strange illustrations, cryptic text, and an overwhelming sense of mystery. But somehow, that's part of the manuscript's allure. It's the not knowing that keeps us coming back, like a puzzle with just one piece missing, the one that never seems to fit. One of the reasons the manuscript is so captivating is its aura of intellectual challenge. For centuries, it has been a riddle that no one can solve. It doesn't just sit on a shelf, it lures people in. Scholars, scientists, hobbyists, and even armchair cryptographers have pored over its pages. They've analyzed every letter, every curve of the script. Some have even spent entire careers attempting to unlock its meaning. And despite all their efforts, the Voynich Manuscript refuses to surrender. It's become a sort of modern-day legend, less about the content of the manuscript itself, and more about the thrill of the pursuit. You could say that the manuscript is less a book than it is an experience. There's a strange satisfaction in trying to solve it, even if you know deep down that the answer might always remain elusive. This is where the concept of the Voynich Manuscript as a cultural artifact becomes interesting. It's no longer just a book. It's a symbol of humanity's quest for knowledge and the lengths we'll go to uncover the secrets of the past. It's an intellectual treasure hunt that spans centuries, a search for something hidden just out of reach. And the search itself has become as significant as the answer. The manuscript becomes the mystery we chase, an unsolved puzzle that keeps the mind sharp, the curiosity alive, and the imagination firing on all cylinders. One of the quirkiest things about the manuscript is that, despite its apparent obscurity, it's become a modern cult object. Fans, amateurs, and conspiracy theorists have pored over every detail of the manuscript's pages, speculating on everything from its origins to its hidden meanings. A simple Google search reveals a world of theories and discussion groups dedicated to the Voynich Manuscript. It's inspired everything from fan fiction to art projects to the kind of conspiracy theories that would make even the most dedicated conspiracy theorists shake their head in disbelief. There are countless theories that aim to make sense of the manuscript's cryptic text. Some suggest that it's a forgotten work of ancient alchemy, containing secret formulas for turning base metals into gold. Others propose that it's a lost medical text, filled with cures and remedies from a bygone era. There's even a theory that the manuscript is a religious or spiritual document, filled with hidden symbols and esoteric teachings that have been lost to time. In some circles, it's even been suggested that the manuscript was written by extraterrestrial beings, an interstellar message disguised as a medieval manuscript. While these theories are entertaining, they also reveal something important about the manuscript. It's not just a book, it's a blank canvas for the imagination. It's a piece of history that invites interpretation, a puzzle that invites answers from every corner of the world. The fact that the manuscript has withstood centuries of scrutiny without yielding its secrets is perhaps the most fascinating part of all. It forces people to think, to imagine, and to create. And in a world where so much is easily accessible with a few clicks of a mouse, there's something refreshing about a mystery that refuses to be solved. And perhaps this is why the manuscript still holds such power. It is undecoded. In an era where most information is just a Google search away, the Voynich Manuscript stands as a rare reminder of how much we still don't know. It's a reminder that there are still mysteries to be unraveled, puzzles to be solved, and questions that have no easy answers. In a way, the manuscript has become a symbol of intellectual humility, a reminder that not everything can be understood, no matter how much we want it to be. But despite its status as an intellectual enigma, the manuscript is not just an academic curiosity, it's also a cultural one. For centuries, it has inspired writers, artists, and thinkers. Some view it as a source of inspiration, a mysterious symbol of knowledge that exists beyond the bounds of ordinary understanding. Its intricate designs and strange symbols have inspired countless interpretations, from abstract art to science fiction. The manuscript has become part of the cultural fabric of our collective imagination. Even in its complete unreadability, the manuscript's artistry has made it an object of fascination. The delicate, intricate drawings of plants, nymphs, and celestial bodies are striking in their beauty. Whether they're meant to convey hidden meaning or simply to be beautiful, the illustrations capture a sense of wonder and mystery. It's easy to imagine that the creator of the manuscript, whether they were a scholar, an alchemist, or simply an eccentric, was trying to express something deep and meaningful through their art. What's more, the manuscript is part of the broader story of human curiosity. It's a physical manifestation of our desire to understand the world around us, to find patterns in chaos, and to uncover the truths that lie beneath the surface. The manuscript challenges us to think differently about the past and our understanding of history. It asks us to consider the possibility that there are things we'll never understand, and yet, that's okay. The manuscript doesn't offer us answers, but it asks the right questions. In the end, perhaps the Voynich Manuscript is more than just an unsolved puzzle. Perhaps it's a mirror reflecting back our own desires and limitations. It's a reminder that there are still mysteries out there, things that we'll never fully understand, but that doesn't make them any less worth exploring. As you read through the pages of the manuscript, or simply imagine its strange symbols and cryptic script, you're part of that quest for knowledge. You're part of the long line of people who have gazed at the manuscript, trying to crack its code, to discover its meaning, and maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest secret of all. We've already dipped into the whirlpool of theories surrounding the manuscript's true purpose: alchemical guide, medical encyclopedia, or lost work of a secret society. But beyond the academic and conspiracy theories, there's another intriguing question. Who exactly would go to the trouble of creating this intricate, unreadable manuscript in the first place? The answer to that question is as enigmatic as the manuscript itself, but that hasn't stopped people from speculating. There's a distinct possibility that the Voynich Manuscript was created by someone with a mind ahead of their time, someone so wrapped up in knowledge, alchemy, or esoteric philosophy that they felt the need to preserve their discoveries, or to hide them. Whoever wrote it didn't just scribble random notes in a notebook. This was deliberate, structured, careful. One of the most popular theories regarding the author's identity is that the manuscript was created by a learned scholar, likely a monk, alchemist, or philosopher. The Renaissance was an era marked by intellectual expansion and an insatiable thirst for knowledge, and there were many scholars and mystics who might have had the means and the motivation to create a book like this. If the author was, in fact, an alchemist or a practitioner of herbal medicine, then the manuscript might have been an attempt to document or even protect the knowledge of their craft. Alchemists often sought to preserve their findings in obscure codes and symbols, hoping to protect their precious secrets from the prying eyes of the church or the authorities. One possible candidate for the authorship of the manuscript is the renowned 13th century English scholar Roger Bacon. Bacon was a visionary who believed in the power of science, and he was deeply interested in the study of alchemy and medicine. In fact, some of his writings suggest that he may have experimented with mysterious formulas and mystical texts. The idea that the manuscript could be the work of Bacon or someone influenced by him has lingered in academic circles for centuries. Some believe that the manuscript was intended as a private notebook, a way for the author to record their discoveries in a language only they could understand. Others suggest that it was written by someone else, a follower or a disciple of Bacon, who sought to preserve his knowledge in a unique way. Another theory places the manuscript in the hands of an even more elusive figure, John Dee, the 16th century English mathematician, astrologer, and advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. Dee was deeply involved in alchemy and the occult, and some have suggested that the Voynich Manuscript might have been his personal record of his magical and philosophical studies. Dee was known to write in secret codes, and his work was often filled with obscure symbols and mystical references. If Dee were indeed the author, the manuscript could be a record of his own experiments, a way for him to encode his knowledge and preserve it from the scrutiny of others. But then there are the more fantastical theories. Some have speculated that the manuscript wasn't created by any earthly scholar or alchemist at all, but by extraterrestrial beings. Yes, you read that right. The manuscript's strange language, bizarre illustrations, and inexplicable content have led some to propose that the book is not of this world. Perhaps, they suggest, it's a gift from ancient aliens, an intergalactic communication meant to impart advanced knowledge to humankind. This theory, while a bit on the fringe, taps into the broader fascination with UFOs and the idea that humanity has been visited by extraterrestrial beings throughout history. If the Voynich Manuscript were an alien text, it would be the ultimate cosmic riddle, a message waiting to be deciphered by the most advanced minds in science and linguistics. Of course, there's the possibility that the manuscript was the product of an entirely different motivation: entertainment. What if the manuscript was just a clever hoax, an elaborate puzzle created by someone with too much free time and a desire for intellectual amusement? Imagine the satisfaction of creating a book that would mystify people for centuries, a book that would spark the imaginations of future generations and provoke countless debates. It would be a kind of intellectual performance art, a way to test the limits of human curiosity and creativity. It's a fun theory, but it also raises the question of why anyone would go to such lengths for a prank, especially one that required such meticulous planning and artistry. One thing that's certain is that the author of the Voynich Manuscript was highly intelligent, skilled in artistry, and likely familiar with a wide range of disciplines. The manuscript's illustrations, ranging from botanical sketches to celestial diagrams, suggest a mind deeply engaged with the natural world and the cosmos. Whoever created it had a strong understanding of plant life, astronomy, and alchemy, or at least the symbols and concepts associated with these fields. It's possible that the manuscript was meant to serve as a sort of record of this knowledge, perhaps a personal repository of secrets, or a way to communicate complex ideas in a form that only a select few could understand. Yet, the most intriguing question remains: why does the manuscript continue to captivate us, even without an answer? The Voynich Manuscript is unlike any other book in history. It's not simply the mystery of its content that draws people in. It's the sheer, impenetrable beauty of the manuscript itself. It's the artistry, the care, the thoughtfulness, the knowledge that someone, somewhere, invested hours, days, perhaps years, crafting a book that would stand the test of time, refusing to give up its secrets. In some ways, the manuscript is like a puzzle that was never meant to be solved. It sits there, in a library at Yale, a symbol of the mysteries that still elude us. Some might argue that we shouldn't bother trying to decode it at all. Perhaps, they suggest, the manuscript's true power lies not in its contents, but in the questions it raises. It challenges us to think deeply about the limits of knowledge, the nature of secrecy, and the beauty of the unknown. As we continue to examine the manuscript, we're not just exploring a relic of the past, we're engaging in a collective quest for understanding. The manuscript's very existence forces us to confront the unknown, to grapple with the mysteries that lie beyond our grasp. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't fully understand, and maybe that's the most valuable thing of all. Sometimes the pursuit of knowledge is just as important as the knowledge itself. And so, the manuscript sits there, waiting. Its secrets remain locked away, its language still unreadable. But in that silence, in that mystery, there is something profoundly beautiful, something worth pondering, if only for a moment before we drift into the quiet night. As we continue to reflect on the Voynich Manuscript and its untold secrets, it's hard not to notice how it captures the imagination in a way few other historical objects can. The manuscript's curious nature isn't just about its cryptic text or enigmatic illustrations, it's also about what it represents: an intellectual frontier, an invitation to ask questions, and a symbol of the mysteries that lie beyond our grasp. The manuscript has come to symbolize the ultimate intellectual riddle, a puzzle that has resisted all attempts at understanding. And this is not just a modern obsession. Even in the centuries following its creation, the manuscript was seen as a relic of something profound, whether that was lost knowledge, an alchemical cipher, or the work of an eccentric genius. Over the years, the manuscript has been housed in various collections, passed from hand to hand, sparking debates and theories at every turn. One key moment in the manuscript's history came in the early 16th century, when it was passed into the hands of the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II of Prague. Rudolf was a curious and eccentric ruler, deeply interested in the occult, alchemy, and the mysteries of the universe. In fact, he was known to surround himself with scholars, mystics, and astrologers. His court was a hotbed for intellectual and mystical activity. It was in this environment that the Voynich Manuscript found its first significant owners outside of private hands. Rudolf is said to have believed that the manuscript held the key to great alchemical secrets, and he was determined to unlock its mysteries. However, after years of attempts, he, like everyone else, was unable to make any sense of it. Still, the manuscript remained an object of fascination, its very existence sparking curiosity about the knowledge it might contain. For years after Rudolph's death, the manuscript remained in the collections of various private owners, its history shrouded in mystery. Eventually, it found its way into the hands of the aforementioned Wilfrid Voynich in 1912. Voynich, a rare book dealer, famously discovered the manuscript in an old Jesuit library in Italy and recognized its potential immediately. He did not have the answers, but he had the drive to bring the manuscript into the public eye. Little did he know, his discovery would mark the beginning of a modern wave of research and speculation that continues today. Voynich's purchase of the manuscript and his subsequent efforts to unlock its meaning attracted the attention of scholars and cryptographers, but the manuscript remained an enigma. By the time Voynich died in 1930, he had not made any headway in deciphering the text. And so, the manuscript's journey continued, from one owner to the next, from one theory to another, until it found its permanent home in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University. It is there, in the cool, dimly lit stacks of Yale, that the Voynich manuscript remains today, its pages filled with loops and swirls, plant drawings, bathing nymphs, and astronomical charts. It sits there, quietly waiting, with no explanation for its strange symbols or intricate illustrations. And yet, in its silence, it continues to captivate the world. It has become not just a historical object, but a living mystery, a symbol of the uncharted territory of knowledge that still exists, waiting for someone to uncover it. The manuscript's current status in popular culture is, in many ways, a reflection of our desire for the unknown. In an age where so much information is readily available at the click of a button, the manuscript serves as a rare reminder that not everything has an easy answer. The unanswered questions it presents have inspired a wide range of interpretations and theories, some grounded in scholarship, others less so, but all of them point to the same universal truth, that we as humans are drawn to the unknown, the mysterious, and the unexplained. In fact, one of the most compelling aspects of the Voynich manuscript is that it's not just a relic of the past, it's an active participant in the ongoing search for knowledge. It challenges us, pushes us, and makes us wonder how much we truly understand about the world. It forces us to question our assumptions and stretch the boundaries of our intellectual curiosity. In a sense, the manuscript becomes a mirror, a reflection of our own limitations, our yearning to uncover the unknown. The manuscript's design, its looping script, its intricate botanical illustrations, its detailed depictions of celestial bodies and bathing nymphs, suggests a work created with intention. Someone poured time and effort into its creation. Someone believed that this book, this text, this code, was important enough to preserve. But why? What was the purpose behind this strange compilation? Was it the work of an individual trying to protect forbidden knowledge? Or was it an artistic endeavor, created purely to mystify and delight? And perhaps that's where the manuscript's true genius lies. Even without a clear translation or explanation, it remains powerful because it remains unsolved. It doesn't offer its secrets easily. It doesn't give up its meaning with a quick glance or a few hours of study. It invites you to spend time with it, to engage with its mystery, to try to unlock its meaning. It asks for your patience, your curiosity, and your imagination. It's a challenge that doesn't have a clear solution, and that's exactly why we're still drawn to it. We may never know the true purpose of the Voynich manuscript. We may never be able to read the text, understand the botanical illustrations, or unravel the symbols in the celestial charts. But what we do know is that it will continue to fascinate us. It will continue to provoke questions. It will continue to inspire theories, debates, and discussions. And perhaps, in the end, that's enough. After all, sometimes the most profound mysteries aren't the ones that are solved. They're the ones that never are. And so, as we look back at this ancient, unreadable manuscript, we're reminded that some questions don't need answers. Some mysteries are meant to remain just out of reach, forever whispering to us, forever pulling us deeper into their enigma. As the decades turn and technology advances, the Voynich manuscript remains an intellectual beacon. And yet, as modern scholars and cryptographers continue to study it, there's an undeniable sense that something has been lost in the translation of the manuscript into the digital age. There's a feeling that in all our attempts to solve it, through AI algorithms, cryptographic deconstruction, and artificial intelligence, we might be missing something fundamental. the human element that gave the manuscript life in the first place. When you look at the manuscript closely, the artistry of its creation stands out. The carefully drawn plants, the seemingly deliberate yet incomprehensible script, the repetitive cycles of bathers and stars, all of these details speak to an artist or scholar, someone who had a purpose in mind. Whoever created the manuscript wasn't simply trying to write words, they were creating something complex, something to be preserved. The manuscript wasn't just a book, it was an intellectual statement, a carefully crafted artifact meant to endure the ages. Whoever wrote it didn't intend for it to be quickly read or understood. They knew that it would take time to decode, perhaps hundreds of years. This human element, the intention behind the manuscript, has, in many ways, been overshadowed by the obsession with solving its mystery. The manuscript has been approached as a riddle, as a puzzle that demands to be decoded. But what if the true value of the manuscript is not in solving it, but in engaging with it, allowing it to spark our curiosity, to challenge our intellect, to push the boundaries of what we think we know? What if the manuscript itself is a testament to the creativity and ambition of the human spirit, not just a cipher to be cracked? The manuscript itself, in its enigmatic form, challenges us to rethink how we approach history, language, and knowledge. When we face something we don't understand, we often try to break it down, to compartmentalize it, to categorize it into something we can grasp. And in doing so, we lose the magic of the mystery itself. We strip away the wonder. The Voynich Manuscript doesn't give us the luxury of understanding. Instead, it asks us to wrestle with it, to hold it in our minds and imagine what it could mean. Perhaps, in a way, the manuscript is asking us to stop focusing so much on the answers and start appreciating the questions. It's challenging us to accept that there are some things that can't be easily explained, and that's okay. It invites us to step into a world where mysteries exist, where we can be the curious minds, the seekers of knowledge, and where the journey itself becomes the reward. That's the true legacy of the manuscript. The manuscript teaches us patience. It forces us to confront the limits of our understanding and to embrace the unknown. It reminds us that knowledge is not always something that can be immediately accessed. Sometimes it requires a deeper engagement, a willingness to sit with the mystery, to let it unfold at its own pace. It's this idea of lingering in the unknown that has made the Voynich Manuscript such a beloved object for those who engage with it. It's the very act of grappling with it, the ongoing process of inquiry and exploration that has inspired so much fascination. It's not about cracking the code, it's about the intellectual exercise of trying and the joy that comes from engaging with a mystery that is beyond our grasp. As scholars and amateurs continue to come together to analyze the manuscript, they are joined by an intellectual community that shares this sense of wonder. And yet, there's also a sense of camaraderie in their shared struggle. They're all in this together, trying to make sense of something that resists comprehension. And even as the years pass and technology advances, the manuscript stands firm in its mystery, holding fast to its secrets. It's a reminder that some puzzles, some mysteries, are meant to remain unsolved. They're meant to keep us questioning, to keep us thinking, to keep us reaching. And so, the manuscript continues to shape the way we view history, knowledge, and the pursuit of truth. It compels us to reconsider how we approach the unknown, how we think about what it means to understand something. It forces us to acknowledge the gaps in our knowledge and to celebrate them, to find beauty in the unanswered. The manuscript doesn't offer closure. It doesn't tie everything up in a neat bow. But perhaps that's its most powerful feature. By leaving us hanging, by keeping us in the dark, it pushes us to think differently, to approach mysteries with humility, and to accept that some things may never be fully understood. And in doing so, it keeps the flame of curiosity alive, lighting the way for future generations of thinkers and dreamers. The Voynich Manuscript is more than just a historical artifact. It's a living, breathing testament to the human desire to understand, to learn, and to discover. It speaks to the timeless nature of human curiosity, a force that transcends centuries and cultures. And in that way, it remains as relevant today as it was when it was first created. A mystery for the ages, a puzzle that will continue to spark our imaginations and push the boundaries of what we think we know. In the end, the Voynich Manuscript is not just about the answers, it's about the questions, and that, perhaps, is its greatest gift to us all. For all its mystery, the Voynich Manuscript isn't just an academic curiosity or an intellectual challenge. It's also become a pop culture icon in its own right. Over the decades, it's inspired everything from novels to movies, art, and even internet memes. In a way, its very unreadability has made it a canvas for creative minds. It exists not just as a physical object, but as a symbol of the unknown, something that invites reinterpretation and reinvention. One of the most interesting developments in the manuscript's journey through the modern world is its embrace by the online community. With the rise of the internet, the Voynich Manuscript has gone from being a scholarly obsession to a cultural touchstone. Anyone with access to the manuscript's digitized pages can now stare at its strange symbols, debate its meaning, and contribute to the growing body of theories and interpretations. It's the ultimate collaborative puzzle, where people from all corners of the globe can come together to try to unlock its secrets. In the world of online forums and niche groups, the Voynich Manuscript has become a kind of intellectual playground. There are entire communities of amateur cryptographers, linguists, and historians who have dedicated themselves to solving the riddle of the manuscript. These groups share theories, work together to analyze new clues, and occasionally throw out wild ideas, like suggesting that the manuscript might be a time capsule from the future, or that it's actually a medieval social experiment designed to test the boundaries of human curiosity. It's in this digital world of theories, debates, and speculation that the manuscript's true magic lies. While the manuscript itself remains a physical object, a tangible artifact housed in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library, its impact has gone far beyond its physical existence. It has become a cultural meme, a symbol of all the mysteries that elude us, all the puzzles that remain unsolved. It represents the joy of the unknown, the thrill of searching for something just beyond our grasp. And that's something everyone can relate to, whether they're a scholar or a casual viewer who stumbled upon the manuscript in an online rabbit hole. The manuscript's status as a cultural icon has also influenced modern art. From its bizarre illustrations to its strange script, the Voynich Manuscript offers a visual language that artists have found endlessly intriguing. The manuscript has inspired everything from graphic novels to conceptual art, where artists use the manuscript's imagery as a jumping-off point for their own creative interpretations. The swirling, organic shapes of the plants and the mystical, otherworldly quality of the illustrations have made it a rich source of inspiration for visual storytellers. In some ways, the manuscript has become more than just a book. It's become a symbol of creative possibility. It offers up its mysteries for reinterpretation, encouraging people to make it their own, to imagine new meanings, new stories, and new possibilities. Even if the manuscript's original purpose remains a mystery, its legacy is one of creation and reinvention. In the hands of artists and creators, the manuscript has become a springboard for new ideas, a blank canvas for fresh interpretations. But beyond the world of art and culture, the Voynich Manuscript also has a place in the world of science and technology. For centuries, scientists have attempted to unlock the manuscript's secrets, hoping to decipher its text, understand its meaning, and perhaps uncover some lost knowledge hidden within its pages. Today, the manuscript continues to draw the attention of scholars, linguists, and computer scientists, all of whom are trying to crack its code using the latest in technology. Modern methods like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computational linguistics have breathed new life into the search for answers. While AI hasn't yet cracked the code, it has revealed some interesting insights. For example, AI has been able to identify patterns in the manuscript script that resemble those found in natural languages, suggesting that the text might follow a structured system similar to that of a real language. While this doesn't give us any definitive answers, it does suggest that the manuscript is a carefully constructed work, not a random jumble of letters. This, in turn, raises further questions. Could the manuscript be a coded message, a work of fiction, or perhaps something entirely different? The manuscript's continued allure also lies in the very fact that it resists all attempts at explanation. In today's world, where information is so easily accessible, there's something profoundly appealing about a mystery that refuses to be solved. The manuscript stands as a testament to the limitations of human knowledge and the enduring power of the unknown. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that remain beyond our understanding, things that no amount of technology or intellectual effort can unlock, and there's a certain beauty in that. But perhaps one of the most important lessons the Voynich Manuscript offers is about the value of the journey. In a world where answers are often at our fingertips, the manuscript forces us to slow down, to think deeply, and to embrace the process of discovery. It encourages us to appreciate the search itself, to find meaning in the questions, and to recognize that sometimes the act of pursuing knowledge is as valuable as the knowledge itself. It's this sense of wonder and curiosity that has kept the manuscript alive for centuries. And while we may never unlock all its secrets, the manuscript will continue to inspire future generations. Its legacy isn't just about the meaning of its text or the identity of its author. It's about the questions it raises, the mysteries it holds, and the spark of curiosity that it ignites in all of us. In the end, the Voynich Manuscript isn't just a book. It's a journey into the unknown, into the limits of our understanding, and into the heart of human curiosity. It will continue to challenge, mystify, and inspire those who encounter it. And perhaps that's exactly what it was meant to do all along. As the mystery of the Voynich Manuscript continues to unfold in the modern world, the manuscript's enigmatic nature also serves as a reminder of the fragility of knowledge itself. We live in an era where access to information is instantaneous and overwhelming. The vast majority of the world's knowledge is a few clicks away, with more digital archives than we can count. And yet, the manuscript serves as a strange beacon, a testament to the limitations of even the most advanced technologies and the boundaries of human understanding. Despite the incredible strides we've made in everything from quantum computing to artificial intelligence, the Voynich Manuscript continues to resist all attempts at decoding. It stands in stark contrast to the age of knowledge we live in, offering a reminder that, despite our achievements, there are still enigmas in the world that remain beyond our reach. The manuscript is like a puzzle that refuses to be solved, a challenge that pushes us to keep searching, no matter how much time passes or how much technology advances. In this sense, the manuscript is both a symbol and a warning. It symbolizes the depth of human curiosity and the lengths we're willing to go to unravel the mysteries of the world. But it also warns us about the inherent limitations of knowledge. The manuscript doesn't just evade cryptographers and linguists. It forces us to confront the very idea that there may be things beyond our ability to understand. Some mysteries, it seems, may remain unsolved for eternity. This idea is further complicated by the fact that, unlike many ancient texts, the Voynich Manuscript doesn't seem to come from any recognizable culture or tradition. While some ancient writings have been deciphered, often with the help of historical context, the Voynich Manuscript resists all attempts to place it within any known intellectual or historical framework. The symbols and illustrations within the manuscript don't correspond to anything familiar. The script, while consistent, doesn't seem to have any relation to any language known to history. If the manuscript's authorship is indeed lost to time, it may represent not just the mysteries of the past, but the human experience itself, a deep, unyielding desire to preserve knowledge for future generations, to record something that will outlive us. What remains unclear, though, is whether the manuscript's creator meant for it to be deciphered at all. The absence of any decipherable meaning is part of its allure, part of its legacy. The manuscript asks questions not just about the past, but about the future, about what we're leaving behind and whether, one day, someone will be able to crack the code we leave behind. It's worth considering why, despite all the attempts to decode it, the manuscript continues to elude comprehension. Perhaps there's something to the idea that the manuscript was never meant to be understood in a traditional sense. Instead, it might have been intended as a record of something intangible, an intellectual journey, a work of art, or a map of a hidden world. It exists as a piece of knowledge that's just out of reach, a perpetual challenge to those who encounter it. In the modern world, it's easy to feel like we've seen it all. The advent of the internet, the rise of digital archives, and the explosion of knowledge have made us feel as though there's nothing left to discover. We can look up any fact, read any book, watch any documentary, and hear the opinions of experts from all over the world. And yet, the Voynich Manuscript reminds us that there is still a corner of the world that resists understanding, something that cannot be reduced to data points or easily cataloged facts. This knowledge gap, the space where mystery still reigns, is crucial. It's part of what makes the manuscript a living thing. As we attempt to understand it, as we try to decode its script and interpret its illustrations, we are engaging in something timeless. We are participating in a centuries-old intellectual tradition. The manuscript invites us into that tradition, challenging us to stretch the limits of our understanding and reach beyond what's possible. It asks us to look at the world and say, what don't we know? And to accept that sometimes the unknown is the most exciting place to be. The manuscript's power doesn't lie in its potential to be solved. It lies in its ability to spark the imagination. In the centuries since it was first discovered, countless minds have tried to piece it together. Scholars, artists, conspiracy theorists, cryptographers, and curious internet dwellers alike have all pored over its pages, each one adding their voice to the growing chorus of speculation. Every new theory, every attempt to crack the code, is part of the ongoing story of the manuscript, a narrative that is still unfolding, even if no one ever cracks it open completely. And this brings us back to the beauty of the manuscript itself. In its silence, in its unreadable script, it asks us to look inward. It asks us not just to seek answers from the outside world, but to consider our own capacity for curiosity, for wonder, for creativity. It challenges us to embrace the unknown, not as a frustrating obstacle, but as an opportunity for exploration. The manuscript invites us to play with the questions, to imagine possibilities, and to recognize that sometimes the journey of discovery is just as important, if not more important, than the destination. Perhaps, in the end, the manuscript isn't meant to be read. Perhaps it's meant to be experienced, to be a vessel for intellectual adventure. As we continue to engage with it, we realize that the manuscript isn't just a relic of the past, it's a living part of the present. It continues to spark debate, inspire creativity, and push the boundaries of what we think is possible. Its mystery, far from being a barrier, is what makes it enduring. It will remain a part of the intellectual landscape, inviting us to explore, to wonder, and to question. And so, the manuscript sits in its glass case, quiet, unreadable, and still holding its secrets. It waits, as it always has, for the next curious mind to approach it, to ask the questions and to embark on the journey that, for now, will always remain unfinished. As we come to the final chapter in this long and winding journey through the Voynich Manuscript, it's impossible not to feel a sense of awe. After all, it's a relic that has defied understanding for centuries. Its pages, filled with cryptic symbols, strange plants, celestial diagrams, and odd bathing nymphs, remain just as mysterious today as they did the day they were discovered, and that enduring mystery continues to capture the collective imagination. Despite all the advancements in science, cryptography, and technology, there are still things that we can't explain, things that challenge the very limits of our knowledge. The Voynich Manuscript, with its unwavering resistance to interpretation, stands as one of those things. It's tempting to think of the manuscript as a key, a treasure map, or an ancient puzzle waiting to be unlocked. But as we've seen, the manuscript may not be about finding answers at all. In some ways, its true gift to us is not the decoding of its script, but the questions it forces us to ask. It reminds us that there is still mystery in the world, still uncharted territory for our minds to explore. It shows us that some things, no matter how much we long to understand them, will remain just beyond our reach. There is a sense of tranquility in the manuscript's refusal to yield its secrets. In an age of information overload, where answers are often just a few clicks away, the manuscript provides a welcome contrast. It forces us to slow down, to look closely, to think deeply, and to appreciate the complexity of a world we can't entirely comprehend. It encourages us to embrace the mystery, to appreciate the unknown, and to remember that the journey of discovery, no matter how frustrating, is just as valuable as the destination. Perhaps this is where the true power of the Voynich Manuscript lies, in its ability to inspire us, to make us wonder, and to remind us of the limitations of our own understanding. It asks us to acknowledge that there are things beyond our grasp, and in doing so, it helps us grow. It fosters humility, curiosity, and creativity. The manuscript itself may never be decoded, but it will continue to spark new ideas, new theories, and new approaches to problem solving. In that sense, it will always be a living, breathing part of human intellectual history. And as we look to the future, we realize that the manuscript's mystery may be its most important legacy. The pursuit to understand it has drawn together people from all walks of life, scholars, scientists, artists, and dreamers, all united by a shared desire to solve a riddle that has remained unsolved for centuries. The manuscript invites us to keep asking questions, to keep pushing the boundaries of our knowledge, and to keep looking at the world with the same sense of wonder and awe that we had when we first began this journey. In the end, the Voynich Manuscript stands as a testament to the power of mystery itself. It's not just a book, it's an experience. It's a symbol of the unknown and a reminder that some questions may never have answers. But that's okay, because in the process of searching, we learn, we grow, and we find beauty in the mystery, not just in the answers. So, as we leave this journey behind, let's remember the manuscript not just as an unsolved puzzle, but as a companion on the road of intellectual curiosity. It doesn't give us all the answers, but it does give us something perhaps even more valuable, a reminder that the search for knowledge is just as important as the knowledge itself. And now, as we dim the lights, close the pages, and let the silence of the manuscript fill the space around us, let's embrace the stillness. Let the mystery remain as it always has, just out of reach, leaving us with a sense of quiet wonder and an invitation to dream about what could be. The truth about the Black Dahlia case. Hey guys, welcome back to Boring History to Sleep. Tonight we take a drowsy detour into one of the most whispered about true crime cases of all time, the story of the Black Dahlia. Now, don't let the nickname fool you. This isn't some glamorous noir fantasy. It's exactly the kind of boring history for sleep that turns a juicy mystery into a very slow crawl through red tape, media frenzy, and human fallibility. Perfect for letting your brain shut down. We're deep in Los Angeles, January of 1947. Morning fog still lingers over the sidewalks, the city's barely stirring. A mother walks her child down a sleepy South Norton Avenue in Leimert Park, a quiet neighborhood with neatly trimmed grass and white picket fences, trying a little too hard to look unbothered by the war years. And then she sees it. At first, it looks like a mannequin. That's what she tells the police later. Too pale, too posed, too clean. Lying in a weedy, undeveloped lot, split clean in two. The torso and lower half placed inches apart, arranged almost surgically, arms raised overhead like a broken doll. The woman drops the child's hand, screams. The LAPD arrive. A crowd gathers fast, reporters even faster. Before forensics gets a look, cigarette butts are already being flicked into the dirt nearby. The crime scene turns into a photo op. One officer swears he sees a journalist kneel down to adjust the body's hand for a better shot. Yes, seriously. And here we begin, not with a clue, not even with a name, just a sliced up woman, a blank file folder, and a city still wiping the post-war smog out of its eyes. The body, as it turns out, belongs to a 22-year-old woman named Elizabeth Short. No ID on her, but fingerprints do the trick. She's already in the system from a previous arrest for underage drinking, which makes things real convenient for the police and real embarrassing for the family. Word spreads, and fast. Headlines scream across the front pages, Black Dahlia slain, body slashed in two. The nickname sticks instantly. Some say it's a nod to a noir film out at the time, The Blue Dahlia. Others think it's because Elizabeth was often seen wearing black. You know, like that's enough to base your murder identity on. This is when the boring part really begins. Because while you might expect the police to pounce on leads, chase down suspects, and crack the case like they do in all those 40s detective movies, the real LAPD of 1947 is, well, let's say, not exactly efficient. The scene is contaminated within hours. Reporters bribe cops for tidbits. Evidence goes missing. At one point, an anonymous tipster actually tells the police where to find Elizabeth's purse and shoe. And they do, neatly perched atop a garbage can. It's all too strange, too staged. By sunset, the facts are still few. The body had been carefully washed. There's no blood at the scene, meaning the murder happened elsewhere. The cuts are meticulous. The mouth, slashed ear to ear in a gruesome grin. You might imagine horror, screaming chaos. But what authorities see is cold calculation. A killer who took their time, who knew what they were doing. And here's where it already gets messy. Because while you're maybe nodding off right now, good sign, the world outside your sleepy blanket cocoon is about to turn this into a 3-ring circus. The press will go into overdrive. The cops will flounder. The suspects will multiply like rabbits in a detective novel. But remember, this isn't a story about solving a mystery. It's a story about never solving it. About watching facts twist, names disappear, and time blur everything into a sleepy, noir-colored fog. And let's take a second to note a particularly weird detail that only boring history can deliver. In 1947, LAPD detectives used clear plastic overlays of the body, transparencies they'd trace on, to map wounds and compare against later crime scenes, like old-school PowerPoint meets serial crime. It didn't help, but it looked very scientific while accomplishing nothing. Now, while we all love a good twist, here's the reality check. This case won't be solved. You probably won't survive this in terms of staying awake, anyway. But that's okay, because this isn't about closure. It's about drifting deeper into the haze of cold case chaos and realizing that not every story needs an ending to be told. Before you settle in, take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe. Only if you really appreciate the content I share. And hey, if you're still listening with your eyes open, drop your location and the local time in the comments. Always cool to see where you're drifting off from. Alright, time to lower the lights, maybe a fan on for that quiet background hum, and together we'll settle into tonight's adventure. The crime scene is taped off now, the crowd's been ushered away, the body's been bagged, and somewhere, in some very dusty corner of LAPD headquarters, a file folder is opened. It reads, Jane Doe number 1. Elizabeth Short is not a name that echoes through the halls of Hollywood. Not at the time, anyway. She's not a starlet, not even close. She doesn't land roles, she barely lands waitressing jobs. But after her death, the press decides to fill in the blanks, and suddenly Elizabeth becomes whoever they want her to be. Aspiring actress, wartime flirt, femme fatale and borrowed heels. The truth, though? It's more ordinary, more melancholy. A story that meanders, full of bus stops and borrowed money. She's born in 1924 in Hyde Park, Massachusetts, back when people still talk about silent films in present tense. Her dad builds miniature golf courses, which is fun trivia until the Great Depression crushes that whole mini-golf empire. Then he drives his car to a bridge and vanishes, leaving a note. He's presumed dead. Years later, he writes to say, oops, he's not. Elizabeth is 6 when this happens. Her mother, Phoebe, works to keep the 5 daughters afloat, and that sense of instability, of things crumbling quietly, follows Elizabeth for years. She's pretty, striking even. That pale skin, raven hair, a sharp smile she knows how to weaponize. Friends say she walks like she's always in a scene. She develops asthma and bronchitis, skips winters in favor of sunnier climes. Eventually, she floats to California. She writes her father, the formerly fake dead one, asks to live with him in Vallejo. Surprisingly, he says yes, but their reunion goes sour fast. He doesn't like her lifestyle, her lateness, her lack of discipline, her dating. She moves out, becomes one more young woman trying to make it in Los Angeles with no money, few friends, and dreams nobody pays for. She drifts between cities, Santa Barbara, San Diego, Hollywood, always with her makeup case, always reinventing. Elizabeth tells people she's acted in movies, that she was engaged to a war hero who died. Some of it might be true, most of it likely isn't, but these lies aren't meant to deceive. They're scaffolding, ways to keep her image upright in a place that values image over everything else. At one point, she's arrested in Santa Barbara for underage drinking. She's just 19, in a cocktail dress, weaving stories to a beat cop who doesn't care. The mugshot, though, that matters. Because in a few years, it becomes the photo they'll all use. Newspapers will crop it, soften it, print it by the millions. Her head tilted just right, black hair perfectly curled, lipstick flawless. It will become more iconic than anything she ever did in life. In the weeks before her death, Elizabeth is basically homeless. She couch surfs, stays in cheap hotels, leans on men for meals, cab fare, and attention. Some sources say she was last seen at the Biltmore Hotel. Others say a nearby bar. Like most things in her story, the details conflict. But one thing's certain, she keeps moving, always walking the line between desperation and showmanship. She's known to friends and strangers as someone who dresses to impress even when broke. She's often in black, high heels, long coats, always made up. There's something about her that makes people project stories onto her. Mysterious, tragic, maybe dangerous. She carries herself like someone auditioning, even when there's no role. And let's be honest, Los Angeles in the late 1940s is a brutal place for a woman without means. The war's over, jobs are drying up, GIs are flooding back, the studios are a closed circle. Women like Elizabeth don't get ahead, they float until something pulls them under. It's no surprise she ends up alone. Here's a strange side note detail, because you're here for the quirky ones too. Elizabeth reportedly dyed her hair with shoe polish. Why? Because she couldn't afford real dye, but she needed that inky, dramatic black. You have to admire the commitment to aesthetic. That's not a Hollywood secret, it's a survival skill dressed like glamour. When her body is found, nobody recognizes her right away. It's only through fingerprints that they link her to that teenage mugshot. Then, almost instantly, she's a celebrity. Not for anything she did, but for how she died. The papers invent a persona to match the gruesomeness. They call her a wannabe starlet, a nightclub regular, a tease, anything to make the story juicier. The reality, she was mostly broke, mostly lonely, and mostly invisible, until she wasn't. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth Short truly aspired to be an actress, or whether that was just something she said because it sounded better than Lost. There's no record of screen tests, no agents, but in Los Angeles, ambition doesn't require a resume, just eyeliner and timing. The Black Dahlia nickname is the final act of transformation. It's catchy, poetic, but misleading. It detaches her from herself, turns Elizabeth Short into something mythic, something that fits on a front page. And from that point forward, the real woman, confused, drifting, human, starts to vanish behind the ink. You'll hear people say she was asking for trouble, that she flirted too much, that she lived dangerously, but all that says more about the people watching than the woman herself. The truth is quieter, smaller, and somehow harder to remember. Tonight, you'll hear her story in full, slowed down, stripped of glamour, and ideal for sleepy brains. It's not a whodunit, it's a what happened. And it starts with a woman who walked into a city and never quite found her place. The lights of Los Angeles still flicker, the palm trees still sway, and somewhere in a file cabinet deep in a police basement, the case still sits, yellowed pages, fraying edges, and one photo on top. Elizabeth Short, half smiling, always frozen in that impossible moment before everything unravels. Elizabeth Short becomes more famous in death than she ever managed in life. The newspapers adore her, though not for any reasons that would have made her proud. They call her an adventuress, which is old-timey code for someone who talks to too many men and doesn't go home early enough. They write her up as a barfly, a gold digger, a mystery girl with a Hollywood dream, and a suspiciously short skirt. Almost none of it is true. But true isn't what sells papers. Behind all this posthumous fanfare is a quieter truth. Elizabeth was lonely. She wasn't popular with other girls, too dressed up, too put together, too into her own legend. But she also wasn't particularly successful with men. She left a trail of small heartbreaks and awkward misunderstandings. Guys who liked her until she didn't return the favor. Men who offered to help, but lost patience when the glamour didn't peel back into something grateful. She spent her final days bouncing between borrowed couches, hotel lobbies, and train stations. She had no fixed address, no steady job, and no one looking for her until it was too late. In San Diego, she befriended a young woman named Dorothy French, who offered Elizabeth a place to stay with her mother. Elizabeth stayed too long. Dorothy grew annoyed. By early January, Elizabeth was back in LA, hitching rides, meeting men for dinner, never with a plan that extended beyond tomorrow. One of her last known companions was a traveling salesman named Robert Red Manley. They met in San Diego. He was married, but claimed Elizabeth was harmless, just looking for company. He drove her to LA, dropped her at the Biltmore Hotel, said she planned to meet her sister. That was the last confirmed sighting of her, sitting in the Biltmore's lobby, smoking a cigarette, waiting for someone who never came. Now imagine her there. The grandeur of the Biltmore all around her, Gilded ceilings, marble floors, bellhops gliding past. She sits, overdressed as always, coat tight around her, makeup flawless, hair lacquered into submission. But behind the poise is uncertainty. She's not really meeting her sister. That story doesn't check out. She's waiting for something, someone. An invitation, a ride, maybe just a better option. And then, for 6 days, she disappears. What happens in those missing days is the black hole at the center of this case. No confirmed sightings, no phone calls, no receipts. She vanishes into the smog and reappears in pieces. The press doesn't care about the missing days. They jump straight to the photos. The more shocking, the better. Elizabeth's body, as mentioned, was cut in half at the waist, drained of blood, and scrubbed clean. There were rope burns on her wrists, cuts on her thighs and breasts, and that infamous Glasgow smile, slashed corners of her mouth curling toward her ears. Her intestines were tucked neatly under her buttocks. It sounds almost theatrical. Horrifying, yes, but also staged, as if whoever did it wanted her found. A quirky forensic footnote here. The bisection was done precisely at the second lumbar vertebra. That's not something the average killer Googles, or could, in 1947. It suggested medical knowledge, or surgical training, or someone very comfortable with anatomy. Police began to think they weren't looking for a maniac in an alley. They were looking for someone calm, controlled, maybe someone with a stethoscope. The body was posed deliberately, arms above her head, legs spread. It didn't look like rage, it looked like ritual. Investigators tried to reconstruct the position to understand it. Some said it was meant to humiliate her. Others said it was artistic. One criminologist even suggested it mimicked surrealist photography, which tells you more about the criminologist than the killer. This brings us to one of the most unfortunate truths in the case. Elizabeth Short became easier to study after death. People who wouldn't have given her 5 minutes while she was alive were now dissecting her, literally and figuratively. Autopsy reports detailed everything. Her dental work, the food in her stomach, the scars on her thighs, even her reproductive organs. One odd note: despite the press's lurid suggestions, there was no evidence of recent sexual activity or assault. Another contradiction between myth and fact. The LAPD set up a massive task force, dozens of officers, hundreds of tips, but no leads that stuck. And here's a particularly bizarre moment. On January 23rd, 10 days after the body was found, the Los Angeles Examiner receives a phone call from someone claiming to be the killer. He tells the editor to expect a letter soon, signed Black Dahlia Avenger, then hangs up. Historians still argue whether this call came from the real killer or just one of the many pranksters who crawled out of the woodwork after the case exploded. Either way, it worked. A few days later, a package arrives: Elizabeth Short's birth certificate, social security card, photos, and an address book, all wiped clean with gasoline. This killer, whoever they are, wants attention, wants credit, and maybe, just maybe, wants to play with the police. For now, all the LAPD can do is scramble. They interview anyone who ever spoke to Elizabeth: roommates, suitors, bartenders, ex-boyfriends. They map her movements, cross-reference cab fares and movie stubs. But it's all static, too much noise, not enough pattern, and no one who can explain those 6 missing days. So here she is, again, but different. Elizabeth Short, the woman with no place to go, now etched into every newspaper in America, and yet still somehow completely misunderstood. The wind picks up outside that Biltmore lobby. The fog thickens over Limerick Park, and in the City of Angels, one more girl fades quietly into legend. The headlines grow louder, black ink, all caps. "Who killed the Black Dahlia?" screams from every newsstand, every diner counter, every grubby newsboy's mitt. But the body's barely cold before the myth starts cooking. Reporters crowd the morgue. The press room at the LAPD turns into a social club with free coffee and morbid banter. And Elizabeth Short becomes less of a person, more of a storyline. The media turns speculative fiction into daily print. Elizabeth is cast retroactively as a dangerous coquette, a wandering siren, an amateur actress who tangled with the wrong man. Never mind that no one can prove she ever acted in anything beyond life. They call her adventurous, mysterious, even a tease. She's blamed for her own murder, quietly, politely, with words like provocative and troubled. Tabloids stretch truth like taffy. Some even claim she was a prostitute, despite zero evidence. Others run with the angle that she hung out with mobsters. Some invent a lesbian love triangle. A few get creative and say she was involved in a secret cult. All fiction, all nonsense, but irresistible to readers. And most shamefully, even the mainstream press joins in. Newspapers blur the line between journalism and pulp fiction so completely, no one remembers where the facts end. Here's a particularly surreal example. One newspaper prints a fake diary entry from Elizabeth, written by a staff writer pretending to be her. In it, Elizabeth confesses her regrets, her fears, her doomed love, all fake, but readers eat it up, and the image of her as a doomed femme fatale crystallizes. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's mother, Phoebe Short, learns about her daughter's death in the worst way imaginable. A reporter calls her under false pretenses, pretending Elizabeth won a beauty contest. Once he has details about her life and background, he drops the act, tells her over the phone that her daughter was brutally murdered, then prints it. There's a race now, not to solve the crime, but to exploit it first. The story sells papers like nothing else. Everyone wants a piece. Competing newspapers offer rewards. Armchair detectives flood the LAPD with tips, dreams, wild accusations. One man calls in to say he saw Elizabeth on a UFO. Another says she spoke to him through his neighbor's dog. The department doesn't laugh anymore. They're too tired. And the police are already overwhelmed, not just by tips, but by the sheer volume of confessions. Within weeks, dozens of people confess to the murder, each with wildly different versions. Some clearly want attention. Others seem to genuinely believe they did it. One man walks into a station, calmly describes the crime scene, and is later discovered to be in another state during the murder. But he wants the notoriety, the fame, or maybe the punishment. There's a sense that everyone's playing a role now. The cops as bumbling detectives, the killer as a twisted artist, the public as rubbernecking spectators. And Elizabeth? She's the perfect noir victim. Dead, pretty, complicated, and conveniently silent. In this whirlwind of attention, people begin rewriting Elizabeth's past. Stories emerge of her turning down powerful men, of being followed by a shadowy figure, of carrying a little black book filled with secrets. But again, none of this is verified. Most of it is invented. And the little black book they refer to? Just a phone directory full of names and numbers from acquaintances, half of which lead nowhere. Fringe theories begin blooming like mold. A popular one at the time claims Elizabeth was killed as part of a sex ring cover-up. Another says she had a baby with a high-ranking politician. Neither is remotely supported by fact, but both have that irresistible scent of scandal. Historians still argue whether the media helped or hurt the investigation more. On one hand, it kept the story in the public eye, ensuring tips kept coming in. On the other, it contaminated evidence, warped public memory, and buried the truth under 10 tons of fantasy. The LAPD tries to regain control, but it's like holding water in a fishnet. They assign more detectives, set up hotlines, but everything leaks. Information meant to be private ends up in the papers. One officer allegedly sells photographs to a tabloid. Another is caught giving reporters inside access in exchange for free drinks. And if you're thinking this sounds like a noir movie, you're not wrong. In fact, the film The Blue Dahlia, released the previous year, becomes eerily entangled with the case. People assume Elizabeth modeled herself after the character, that she called herself the Black Dahlia. There's no proof she ever did. It's more likely the press coined it after the fact, but it sticks. It sounds poetic, exotic, marketable. The irony, The Blue Dahlia is a crime film where the real killer is someone unexpected and the beautiful woman is not as she seems. Life imitates art and then bends it for better lighting. Back in the police station, the real investigators, those still trying to do their jobs, are drowning. Every time they get close to a lead, a new headline distracts the public. Witnesses get spooked, suspects vanish, evidence is lost or mishandled, and the trail, already faint, begins to evaporate. But the press isn't done yet. A Los Angeles newspaper receives an anonymous package, neatly addressed, filled with Elizabeth's belongings. Her ID card, a few photos, and a business card. all wiped clean with gasoline. Whoever sent it is watching, toying with them. Maybe it's the killer. Maybe it's just someone who got hold of her things. No fingerprints, no return address, just another question added to the growing pile. Outside, Los Angeles keeps spinning. Neon signs flicker. Streetcars hum past. And in every bar, every beauty salon, every diner, someone whispers a new version of the story. Who was she? Who killed her? Was she really that glamorous? The city already forgets what Elizabeth looked like in motion, walking, talking, living. They remember only the photo, that mugshot with the dark lipstick and half smile. The photo becomes her. It's printed, enlarged, pinned to office walls, but it's just an echo, a final fixed image of a girl who never got to correct the record. Down in the evidence rooms of the LAPD, boxes begin piling up like unanswered prayers. Files labeled with leads that fizzled out, addresses that turned up nothing, men with alibis too solid to shake. Somewhere amid the stacks of ash-colored paper, the Black Dahlia file grows bloated and tired. And still, no answers. The department is under pressure. Reporters are asking harder questions, city officials are demanding results, and the public has started to turn. Whispers of incompetence follow the detectives around like smog. The longer it takes to solve the case, the more the case starts to define them. Not a murder they investigated, the murder they never solved. Chief of Detectives Thad Brown, a man with a permanently furrowed brow and a very strong preference for order, assigns the Dahlia case to a group of seasoned investigators. Among them, Harry Hansen, Finis Brown, no relation, and a rotating list of supporting officers, all seasoned and all about to experience a level of frustration rarely achieved outside of tax season. They begin with what they know. The body was left in Leimert Park, not killed there, just dropped off. So, somewhere, there's another location, the real crime scene. A home, perhaps, or a private clinic. The level of cleanliness and precision suggests indoor work and serious time spent. But Los Angeles is big, and 1947 forensic science is more polite guesswork than hard science. They canvass the neighborhood, ask about strangers, strange smells, suspicious noises. No one saw a car, no one heard anything. It's like the killer floated in and out of that empty lot. One neighbor claims they saw a dark sedan parked nearby early that morning, but that lead dries up like a puddle in July. Back at headquarters, phone lines ring like slot machines. Thousands of tips pour in, most are nonsense, some are malicious. One man says he saw a woman matching Elizabeth's description at a downtown theater with a tall man in a gray suit. Another swears he danced with her at the Zenda ballroom. When asked for dates and times, none of it aligns. The fog thickens. Then there are the confessions. At one point, more than 50 people claim they killed Elizabeth Short. Some walk into stations, calmly describe details they couldn't possibly know. Others send letters. A few phone in dramatic monologues. The police separate the outright lies from the maybe-maybes. A handful of people are interrogated more seriously, but every confession collapses under scrutiny. One man, a 35-year-old transient, offers a bizarrely detailed story about tying Elizabeth up in an abandoned shack and using medical tools on her. He knows details that weren't made public, but under pressure, he folds. Says he read about it in a newspaper, pieced it together, they release him. The police commission even creates a special task force, nicknamed the Dahlia Squad, dedicated solely to the case. Detectives work overtime, reviewing old cases for patterns. They consult medical professionals, hoping to match the body's surgical cuts to someone in the area with that kind of anatomical knowledge. They make a list of every doctor, nurse, intern, and surgical student in Los Angeles. It's a long list. One idea is floated, maybe the killer is a woman. It would explain the meticulous cleaning, the missing blood, the controlled violence. Maybe it was personal, maybe it was someone Elizabeth knew well. But the theory falls apart quickly, mostly because nobody can point to a suspect who fits. Historians still argue whether the LAPD genuinely tried to solve the case or simply got overwhelmed by the scale. It's easy to imagine burned-out detectives, surrounded by photographs, maps, and mugs of cold coffee, just staring at the same few facts again and again, hoping something new jumps out. Nothing does. The longer the case goes unsolved, the more the public starts inventing their own answers. Amateur sleuths send in their theories, often written in longhand, sometimes decorated with little skull drawings in the margins. One man sends in a list of all the men Elizabeth ever spoke to, as if flirtation equals motive. Others focus on the crime scene's artistic layout, suggesting the killer wanted to make a statement, but a statement of what exactly is anyone's guess. Here's a strange procedural detail. At one point, the LAPD hires a graphologist, a handwriting expert, to analyze the typed and handwritten notes sent by the supposed Black Dahlia Avenger. He declares the person to be neurotic, possibly narcissistic and methodical. Groundbreaking. Unfortunately, nearly every serial letter-writing kook fits that description, so again, nowhere. As time drags on, detectives start reviewing older unsolved cases. In particular, a murder from 1943, a woman named Georgette Bauerdorf. She was found in her bathtub in her Hollywood apartment, strangled. No sign of forced entry. The press immediately speculates there's a connection. Young brunette, lived in LA, unsolved. It's enough of a match to sell papers. But the cases are very different. Bauerdorf came from wealth. Her killing was personal, not theatrical. The Dahlia killing, on the other hand, seems more cold-blooded, calculated, more about control than emotion. Still, theories swirl. Detectives cling to one hope. Someone will crack under guilt, or vanity, or both. They keep eyes on the newspapers, hoping the killer will send another letter, make another call, leave another breadcrumb. But aside from the first dramatic gesture, the box of belongings, nothing materializes. And the public begins to move on, slowly, half-heartedly. The front page makes room for other headlines. The case moves to the second section, then the back then disappears. But inside LAPD headquarters, the file remains open. A silent reminder, not just of failure, but of noise. Too much of it. In a way, it was never the perfect crime. It was the perfect mess. A tragedy so big and loud and irresistible that everyone touched it, smudged it, until there was nothing clean left to study. And in the middle of it all, Elizabeth Short, still without justice, still reduced to a nickname, still trapped in a photo that tells less than it shows. The files are thick now, stacked with memos, photographs, testimony transcripts, and lists of names that mean nothing. But one section of the Dahlia file starts to read more like a dating app history than a murder investigation. The LAPD begins working through a long, often contradictory trail of men. Some who dated Elizabeth, some who claimed they did, and some who likely only saw her once at a bus stop and got carried away. These are the phantom suitors, the almost boyfriends, the gents with trench coats and too much cologne. Each one is treated like a possible killer, at least for a few hours. It's exhausting, for everyone involved. Robert Red Manley remains a prime figure at first. He's the last person known to have seen Elizabeth alive. A traveling salesman with slicked hair and a guilty conscience, Manley cooperates with police from the start. He takes lie detector tests, submits to hours of questioning, even gets locked up in the psych ward for a few days, just in case. But there's no evidence. His timeline holds. The cops let him go, though he'll never really escape suspicion. Years later, he'll still insist, "I didn't kill her," as if he's trying to convince himself, too. Other names begin to pile up, some plausible, most laughable. One of them, a nightclub promoter, says he met Elizabeth once and offered her a role as a hostess. She declined. That's his entire connection, but his ego can't resist the chance to be part of the legend. Another man claims he once kissed her after a dance. She didn't seem like the type to get murdered, he says, whatever that means. One thing becomes painfully clear. Elizabeth's social life wasn't glamorous, just messy. She had acquaintances, not allies. Men bought her drinks, not safety. Some were drawn to her beauty, others maybe to her loneliness, but none could offer stability. Not that she ever asked for it. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth truly sought love, or whether she was just keeping her options open, looking for a way to survive another week. Romantic attachments, in this version of Los Angeles, weren't about connection, they were about contingency. Who could get her a meal, a ride, a roof? Not necessarily in that order. But the police aren't looking for sad poetry, they want motive. Jealousy, rejection. Maybe one of these men flew into a rage when she said no. Maybe someone mistook her performance of confidence for a promise she never intended to make. Still, no one sticks. For all their efforts, not a single man among her known companions has a clean motive or a dirty alibi. So the LAPD expands their reach, starts checking anyone who might have crossed paths with her, however briefly. Here's where things get, frankly, weird. One suspect claims to be a psychic. He shows up to the station with charcoal sketches of Elizabeth and says her spirit guided his hand. When pressed for details, he admits he got most of his information from the radio. Another man brings in a stack of letters he believes were written by Elizabeth to him, except they're addressed to someone named George, and he can't explain why they're in his sock drawer. Then there's the aspiring actor who tells police that Elizabeth once mentioned she liked to walk alone at night. When asked what this has to do with anything, he shrugs. He just thought it might be relevant. They don't even write his name down. One officer later describes this phase of the investigation as a dating history without dates. Everyone wants to be part of the story, even if they barely knew the lead character. And Elizabeth, it seems, was too polite or too practiced in survival to push people away hard enough to be remembered clearly. The press keeps digging, too. They start naming names in print, much to the department's frustration. One column openly speculates that a man Elizabeth barely knew killed her out of unrequited lust. The man, upon reading this, turns himself in out of sheer panic. He spends 36 hours in custody, then is released with an apology and a free ham sandwich. Among the murk, a few patterns emerge. Elizabeth often presented herself differently to different people. To some, she was a war widow. To others, a film extra. She wasn't malicious, just unmoored. Telling stories was easier than explaining the truth. That she was broke. That she didn't know where she'd sleep next. That she didn't belong anywhere in particular. One friend described her as a girl who lived like a question mark, always moving, always uncertain, not reckless, just improvising. There's a fringe theory that maybe Elizabeth was being watched, that one of her suitors had stalker tendencies, but no real evidence surfaces, no threatening letters, no diary entries, just a few vague accounts of men hanging around, staring too long, asking too many questions, which, in LA, is practically the background noise. And through it all, the detectives keep turning up nothing solid. They hold meetings, draw maps, compare timelines. But Elizabeth's path in her final weeks is like a chalk outline, drawn in the rain, visible just long enough to frustrate you before it vanishes entirely. The city starts to forget, slowly. But for the detectives still on the case, it becomes a quiet obsession, the sense that they missed something. That the killer was among the names in the file, but they hadn't looked hard enough, or had looked too hard and seen only reflections. Outside, the sun keeps baking the sidewalks. The palm trees don't care. And somewhere in the dull glow of an all-night diner, another waitress serves a plate of eggs to a man reading about the Black Dahlia. He mutters something about dames in danger, and the city moves on, one headline at a time. By early spring 1947, the initial frenzy around the Black Dahlia case begins to settle into something more unsettling. Silence. No new leads, no shocking breakthroughs. Just a slowly cooling trail and a stack of unsatisfying theories. With no clear suspect, the story morphs into speculation. And speculation, in the absence of facts, grows like ivy. So the theories begin. The precision of the cuts, especially the surgical bisection at the lumbar spine, becomes the obsession of armchair detectives and seasoned officers alike. It wasn't just gruesome, it was skillful. The killer had separated the body at what's known as the intervertebral disc, something a trained surgeon might recognize instantly. Not a butcher, not a common thug, someone educated, maybe even licensed. This is where the investigation tips into the realm of white coats and scalpels. The police consult with doctors, medical students, and coroners. One Los Angeles County coroner, Dr. Frederick Newbar, describes the work as neatly done, which, under the circumstances, is maybe the creepiest compliment on record. Surgeons at the University of Southern California review the autopsy and agree whoever did this had practice, not a first-timer. So the LAPD compiles a list. Every doctor, medical student, and intern in the city. They begin the painfully dull process of background checks. Most are ruled out quickly. A few raise eyebrows. One surgeon, for instance, had recently lost his license due to erratic behavior and inappropriate conduct with patients, but he'd moved out of state. Another had a nervous breakdown the week of the murder, but was in a hospital under observation. A third had been reported for dissecting animals in his garage. Yes, really, but nothing directly connected him to Elizabeth. Historians still argue whether the surgical angle is as significant as it seems. Some say the cuts could have been done by anyone with enough nerve and basic anatomical knowledge. Others insist the killer had to be a trained professional. The only thing they agree on, it wasn't random. This wasn't done in a panic, it was controlled. That's what makes it haunting. Then there's the matter of the body's presentation. As we know, Elizabeth's body was scrubbed clean, literally washed, head to toe. Even her nails were clean. No blood, no bruises beyond the intentional wounds. It wasn't a rage killing, it wasn't messy, it was artful. Police psychologists get involved. Yes, even in 1940s, forensic psychology is poking its head into homicide. They suggest the killer may have had an emotional detachment from the act, someone with psychopathic tendencies who viewed the murder as performance, maybe a power play, maybe a message. The posing of the body, arms above the head, legs spread, face carved into a grotesque smile, is a statement, but no one can quite agree on what it's saying. Some believe it was intended to degrade her, others say it was symbolic. One particularly fringe theory proposes that the killer was influenced by surrealist art, namely, the work of Man Ray, whose bizarre photographic compositions often featured dismembered mannequins and harsh lighting. Here's the odd part. Man Ray was based in Los Angeles, and he did in fact travel in social circles that brushed up against medical professionals and oddballs. It's enough to make some researchers squint a little harder. A connection? Or just another coincidence in a city made entirely of them? Then comes the theory about the mob. LA, like any self-respecting post-war metropolis, has its fair share of organized crime. And one whisper that circles the back rooms of the precinct is that Elizabeth got involved with the wrong people. Maybe accidentally. Maybe she saw something. Maybe she heard something. Maybe she was used as a warning. The trouble with the mob theory, it's almost too clean. The murder is precise, yes, but also showy, and the mob doesn't usually go for theatrical gestures involving bisected corpses left in residential neighborhoods. That's bad for business. Still, the theory lingers, especially among those who want the case to involve big names, smoky rooms, and criminal power plays. It's sexier than the truth, which may be nothing more than a lonely man, a quiet room, and a victim nobody would miss. But just when the case seems to be stagnating in polite medical horror, a new idea surfaces. Maybe Elizabeth's death wasn't about who she was, but about what she represented. To someone unstable, angry, or delusional, she might have embodied rejection, temptation, or control. The murder becomes a statement not about her, but about something broken in the killer. This theory suggests that the killer didn't know her well, maybe met her once, maybe didn't even know her name, but fixated, obsessed, planned, and then struck in a way that was both intimate and distant, as if killing her was never about her at all. In their search for connections, detectives look at similar unsolved murders. A few cases stand out. Women found mutilated, sometimes posed, always discarded. Most, unfortunately, lack the forensic depth to link them. One woman was found in a field, disemboweled. Another disappeared after leaving work at a downtown office. None were as carefully arranged as Elizabeth, but the echoes are eerie. And then there's the strange persistence of people trying to be part of the mystery. In the months following the murder, dozens of women show up at police stations claiming they knew Elizabeth. Some just want attention. Others seem sincere, even shaken. One woman insists that she and Elizabeth both dated the same doctor, a man who gave them both free rides and creepy gifts. She can't remember his name or his address. The lead dies fast. Frustration builds. Among officers, yes, but also the public. People want an ending. They want a face, a motive, a mugshot to pin their anxieties to. But what they get instead is a void. And into that void, they pour more theories, more suspects, more stories. Some of those stories are wild. Elizabeth was part of a secret government experiment. Elizabeth was a victim of satanic ritual abuse. Elizabeth wasn't even really dead. Her murder was faked to protect her from someone powerful. All nonsense, all predictable. When the truth is too mundane or too elusive, fantasy steps in to offer answers. So the case drifts, again, between doctors and drifters, between art and anatomy. The killer is out there, maybe watching, maybe laughing, maybe long dead. And Elizabeth Short remains impossibly still at the center of a mystery that refuses to close its eyes. A week after the murder, just as the media firestorm threatens to flicker out, the Los Angeles Examiner receives something new, a letter, typed, blocky, straight to the point. It's signed the Black Dahlia Avenger. The letter is disturbing, not because it's grotesque, but because of its calm, mocking tone. The author offers to turn themselves in, teases the police for their failure, mentions Elizabeth by name. It's clear they've been reading the papers, absorbing every word printed about her, about the investigation, about the public's gory curiosity, and now they want to insert themselves into the story, or maybe claim ownership of it. Inside the envelope are pieces of Elizabeth's identity, her social security card, her birth certificate, newspaper clippings, some of her personal photos, a few address book pages carefully wiped with gasoline. That detail stands out. It's not something a casual prankster would think to do. Whoever sent it is trying to remove fingerprints, avoid tracing. This isn't just attention-seeking, it's calculated. The LAPD believes this could be from the real killer. It's too specific, too intimate. They dust it for prints, nothing usable. The paper? Generic. The typewriter? Common. The gas? Standard. Every lead becomes a wall. Still, the task force finally feels like it has something solid to chase. But this isn't the only letter. More begin arriving. One is written in childish block letters. Another comes in verse, like a creepy nursery rhyme. Most are signed Black Dahlia Avenger. One is smeared with what looks like lipstick. Others come in riddles, like puzzles no one asked for. They reference dates, names, addresses, but every time the police investigate, they hit dead ends. The information is either vague, wrong, or deliberately misleading. Historians still argue whether these letters came from the real killer or just copycats drawn in by the spotlight. The case was everywhere. Front pages, radio shows, water cooler chatter. The public wasn't just interested, they were addicted. And some people wanted to inject themselves into the narrative, no matter how ghoulish the method. One man confesses to writing 3 of the letters. He says he was drunk, lonely, and thought it would make him feel important. He's arrested, briefly, then released after questioning. His letters match the tone but not the timing. Still, it's a reminder that in high-profile murders, you're never just chasing a killer. You're also chasing every person who wants to feel like one. Police try everything. They send the letters to behavioral analysts, ask linguists to look for patterns, try handwriting experts. Nothing sticks. The letter writer either disappears or blends into the growing crowd of hoaxers. One letter even taunts, "You'll never catch me," which is unoriginal, sure, but somehow still chilling when tied to an actual body in a vacant lot. The killer, if it is the killer, isn't just enjoying the chaos, they're feeding off it. Here's a fun historical aside. In 1907, Los Angeles was considered a hub for cranks, not in the modern internet troll sense, but real-life face-to-face obsessives. Men who stood on street corners yelling about communists, women who showed up at police stations with dreams they were convinced were clues. It was the golden age of civic weirdness. The Dahlia case just gave it a central stage. The media, for their part, keep printing the letters. It's good for sales. Every letter feels like an update, like the story's alive again. Even when the LAPD asks for restraint, papers like the Herald Express and Examiner publish full texts, often before detectives have finished reviewing them. Journalism ethics take a back seat to headline real estate. And here's a deliciously strange tidbit. One of the letters includes a location where something will be left. Police follow it. At the site, they find a small suitcase containing a pair of high-heeled shoes, a blouse, and a neatly folded skirt. No blood, no body, just clothes, clean, placed with intention. Are they Elizabeth's? Maybe, or maybe not. Witnesses say she was last seen wearing similar items, but no one can confirm. There's no DNA testing in 947, and the clothes contain no usable fibers or prints. It's just more ambiguity in a case already drowning in it. The public begins referring to the killer as a kind of ghost, unseen, ever present, always one step ahead. The LAPD, embarrassed and exhausted, begins tightening its communication channels. They stop commenting on the letters, stop announcing tips, but by then, the damage is done. The case has been turned into performance art. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Short, her real self, not the headline version, continues to vanish from the narrative. The public forgets the girl with asthma who moved west chasing warmth. They forget the woman who dyed her hair with shoe polish. They forget her awkward smile, her borrowed dresses, her trail of odd jobs and short-term friends. The Black Dahlia persona has swallowed her whole. And it's not even a consistent persona. One day she's painted as a glamorous seductress, the next a naive victim. The papers reinvent her with each edition, depending on the mood of the city. Her reality is buried beneath fictionalized fragments, echoed and distorted by every letter the police receive. Then, the letters stop. No final goodbye, no signature move, just silence. The kind that creeps in and stays. The LAPD waits, hoping for a slip-up, a second act, some sign that the killer wants back in, but nothing comes. Did the killer lose interest, move away, die? Or was it never the killer to begin with? Were all the letters just noise, postmarked chaos with no real connection? That's the problem with ghosts. You can't arrest them, you can't cross-examine them, you can only wait for them to make a mistake. And this one never does. So the police are left staring at ink on paper, typed threats, taunts, teases, a trail of whispers that leads nowhere. The kind of puzzle that makes you feel like you're close to something until you step back and realize it was just scribbles all along. Outside the precinct, the city keeps churning. The smog rolls in again. Trolley bells ding. And on every newsstand, the latest copy of the Examiner flaps lazily in the breeze. Who is the Black Dahlia Avenger? It asks. No one answers. By the early 1950s, the case is officially still open, but in practice, it's a cold file sitting on a dusty shelf. Dozens of suspects have come and gone. Leads have grown stale. The public has shifted its curiosity to newer tragedies, fresher scandals. But in the shadows of the city, one name keeps creeping back into the conversation. A name that will come to dominate all modern theories about the murder of Elizabeth Short. Dr. George Hodel. He's not part of the early suspect list. In fact, he doesn't even surface until years later. But once he does, it's hard to ignore him. He's like a character written by someone who got bored of realism and decided to add a villain with flair. George Hodel is a physician, a high IQ polymath, and, allegedly, a deeply disturbing human being. Born in 1907, he grows up in Los Angeles, breezing through school thanks to a gifted intellect. He studies at Caltech, drops out, reappears in medical school, becomes a successful venereal disease specialist, a booming business in 1940s Hollywood, where morality is often optional. Hodel is wealthy, eccentric, and lives in the Soden House, a Mayan revival-style mansion designed by Lloyd Wright, son of the Frank Lloyd Wright. It looks less like a home and more like something you'd summon a demon in. The windows are slit-like, the facade jagged. At night, it resembles a fortress or a set piece from a noir horror film. In other words, perfect vibes for someone who may or may not be a killer. He's also deeply embedded in the Los Angeles elite. Artists, actors, politicians, they all pass through his home. And so do less savory characters. The parties are notorious. Jazz, booze, nudity, photography sessions that toe the line between erotic and grotesque. If Hollywood has a shadow, Hodel is living in it. Now, here's where things get squirmy. In 1949, George Hodel is accused by his teenage daughter, Tamar, of sexual abuse. It leads to a trial. The charges are horrifying, even by today's standards. Multiple minors testify. The details are graphic, deeply unsettling. Tamar insists she saw him kill someone, maybe even Elizabeth Short, but Hodel is acquitted. It's one of those verdicts that makes everyone shift uncomfortably in their chairs. His status, his wealth, and his connections play a part. There's no justice, but there's enough smoke to catch the LAPD's interest. So they bug his house. Yes, In 1950, the LAPD installs listening devices in the Selden house as part of a broader investigation, not just into the Short case, but into Hodell's alleged underworld activities, including abortions, then illegal, and rumored assaults. The transcripts from this wiretap are chilling. In one recorded moment, Hodell allegedly says, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead." Historians still argue whether that line is a dark joke, a slip, or a confession, but it's enough to keep Hodell on the radar. The problem is, despite the creepy audio and his deeply checkered past, there's still no hard physical evidence linking him to the murder. The LAPD quietly and awkwardly lets it go. He isn't charged, he isn't arrested, he just leaves the country, moves to Asia for years, works in public health, reinvents himself again, like some twisted chameleon, and the case goes colder than ever. Then, decades later, something bizarre happens. In the early 2000s, George Hodell's own son, Steve Hodell, publishes a book. It's called Black Dahlia Avenger, and it's not just another theory piece. Steve Hodell is a retired LAPD detective. Yes, really, a trained investigator. And in his book, he names his own father as Elizabeth Short's killer. It's an accusation that shakes the case like a snow globe. Steve details his father's medical knowledge, his surreal photography, his eerie proximity to the investigation, and, of course, that chilling recorded confession. He even connects George to surrealist art circles that idolize dismembered mannequins, lending credibility to that whole crime as performance theory. According to Steve, George had both the means and the motive, a woman who got too close, or who rejected him. He believes Elizabeth was killed in the Selden house itself, and that the layout of the body matches the patio tiles, like she was arranged, examined, then moved. Skeptics argue that Steve Hodell's theory, while compelling, has too many leaps, too much reading between lines. Others say it's the strongest theory yet, and the closest thing we'll ever get to a confession. George Hodell died in 1999. He never admitted guilt, never faced charges, never saw the media storm that would follow his name. If he was the killer, he outmaneuvered everyone. If he wasn't, he's still one of the most uncomfortable red herrings in American crime history. A quirky little detail? George Hodell was once a suspect in another murder, that of Ruth Spaulding, his former secretary. She died of a drug overdose under suspicious circumstances in the 1940s. Hodell signed the death certificate himself and had her cremated quickly. No autopsy. Later, investigators quietly reopened the file. Too late, of course, like always. So here we are, decades later, still staring at a name that feels like it should be the answer. George Hodell, doctor, voyeur, maybe murderer. The man who lived in a house that looked like a tomb and never blinked when questioned. The case, by this point, is a relic. But in the corner of every discussion, George Hodell lurks, like a villain who might have stepped out of a Raymond Chandler novel but turned out to be all too real. And Elizabeth Short? Still waiting, still unnamed in her own story as theories orbit the man who may have stolen her life. The story could have ended there, just another chilling suspect fading into the twilight of history. But then Steve Hodell kept going, because in his eyes, this wasn't just a cold case, it was a family reckoning. His father's secrets weren't just about Elizabeth Short, they were about everything. Art, power, women, manipulation, and what happens when someone with enough intelligence and money decides that rules don't apply. Steve doesn't just write one book, he writes a whole series. Black Dahlia Avenger is just the beginning. In the year following its publication, he keeps digging, keeps linking his father to other unsolved murders, creating a sprawling tapestry of horror that spans decades and continents. He turns every page of his father's life into a clue, a possible angle, a thread that might lead somewhere darker. And for a while, people pay attention. The media rediscovers the case, podcasts pick it up, crime shows revisit the evidence. True crime fans debate it over brunch and in online forums with the intensity of a doctoral dissertation. And at the center of it all is the image of George Hodell, glasses perched on his nose, eyes that never quite smile, and a mind that seems 3 steps ahead, even from the grave. Steve Hodell's background helps. He knows police procedure. He understands what makes an investigation stall. He He takes what the LAPD gave up on and tries to make it breathe again. He revisits the Soden house, uses photos and blueprints to build his theory that Elizabeth was killed right there, in the tiled courtyard where partygoers once sipped champagne and discussed art. According to Steve, the evidence isn't just circumstantial, it's architectural. He overlays the crime scene photo with the courtyard's dimensions, claims the pose matches the grid of the tiles, suggests the house was used like a canvas. He even brings in cadaver dogs years after the fact to search the basement. The dogs indicate traces of human decomposition. Of course, no remains are found, just whispers and the weight of old stone. Historians still argue whether Steve Hodell's case is compelling or just creatively obsessive. Some praise his work as dogged and courageous. Others say he's doing forensic origami, folding the past to fit a theory. But no one can deny the impact. George Hodel, once a footnote, is now synonymous with the Dahlia case. And Steve? He's become its most relentless narrator. Here's a strange wrinkle. Steve believes George Hodel was a serial killer, not just responsible for Elizabeth Short, but for multiple women whose cases were never solved, often involving mutilation, posing, or signs of surgical skill. He links his father to the infamous lipstick murders in Chicago and the Zodiac case in Northern California. It's a chilling, continent-spanning theory. Critics say it's too much, that one man couldn't possibly be responsible for all that. But George Hodel wasn't just anyone. He was charismatic, educated, a man with enough intelligence to manipulate people and systems. He had connections, influence, and crucially, the perfect public mask. To the outside world, he was a successful doctor, a cultured intellectual, a man of science and sophistication. But to those close to him, especially his own children, he was something else entirely. Distant, dark, dangerous. In Steve's books, the most disturbing details aren't just the timelines and forensic guesses, they're the memories, the flashbacks to growing up in a house filled with strange art, secret rooms, unpredictable moods. Steve writes about moments that, in hindsight, feel charged with menace. His father's indifference, the strange women who passed through, the stories that didn't add up. One especially unsettling photograph surfaces in George Hodel's private collection, an artistic, black and white portrait of a woman with dark hair and delicate features. Steve is convinced it's Elizabeth Short. Others disagree. The photo becomes a point of debate. Is it her, or just another woman who looked a bit too much like the myth? Meanwhile, the Soden house becomes something of a pilgrimage site for true crime fans. It's been restored now, stylish and expensive, rented out for photo shoots and dinner parties. But in the cracks of the stone and the cool hush of the halls, some visitors claim they feel something else. An echo, an unease, the lingering presence of something unfinished. The media, hungry for new angles, picks up Steve's crusade. He appears on TV, gives interviews, hosts presentations with laser pointers and floor plans. People listen, and not just out of morbid curiosity. There's something deeply human about a son trying to solve a murder, maybe several, that the world gave up on. And yet, for all the interviews, the books, the reanalysis of old evidence, no charges are filed, no cases reopened. The LAPD politely doesn't endorse the theory. They acknowledge the interest. They don't argue, but they also don't act. Because in the end, George Hodel is dead, has been for years. Even if he was the killer, there's no trial, no arrest, no real closure. Just a theory that feels too compelling to ignore and too complex to prove. And so the debate continues. On message boards, in articles, around dinner tables, Steve Hodel keeps writing, keeps connecting the dots, and the rest of us keep wondering if he might be right. Elizabeth Short, meanwhile, remains where she's always been in this story, silent, distorted, half forgotten beneath the weight of the theories. Her voice is lost, but her image, that never fades. The pale face, the dark curls, that infamous smile carved and eternal. And somewhere, maybe, that smile is what keeps George Hodel's name alive, whether or not he deserved it. As the years stretch out and decades roll past, the Black Dahlia case begins to settle into a different kind of life, no longer just a murder investigation, but a cultural phenomenon. It evolves into myth, the kind whispered about in dark corners of backlot studio tours, or dissected in film theory classes next to noir classics. The Dahlia isn't a victim anymore, not exactly. She's a symbol, a shadow, a story told so many times from so many angles, it barely resembles its origin. And here's the trickiest part. Most people don't know any of the facts. They know the headlines, the nickname, the photo, maybe the general idea that she was cut in half, or that her murder was never solved. But the person, the context, the details, all sanded down by time and retelling until only the outline remains. In this new form, the case stops being about justice. It becomes atmosphere, texture, a piece of vintage Los Angeles lore, like the Hollywood sign or that one diner booth where James Dean supposedly sat. Elizabeth Short turns into a kind of urban mascot, used to sell intrigue, spook tourists, or serve as moody inspiration for fashion shoots. The crime itself, with all its horror and tragedy, becomes less important than its aesthetic, which is both surreal and depressing. By the 1970s and 80s, the case starts showing up in unexpected places. Writers, musicians, and filmmakers borrow pieces of the Dahlia mystery to infuse their work with a little edge. Horror directors name-check her. Novelists construct fictional worlds around the crime. Even David Bowie allegedly referenced the case during one of his more experimental Los Angeles phases, because of course he did. In 1987, James Ellroy publishes The Black Dahlia, a gritty noir novel that fuses fact and fiction so tightly you can't always tell what's real. In Ellroy's version, Elizabeth is at the center of a tangled web of obsession and violence, reimagined through his lens of stylized sleaze and poetic grime. The book becomes a bestseller. It introduces a whole new generation to the mystery, but not the truth, because in this version, the killer is invented. The plot is resolved. The case, as always in fiction, has an ending. Historians still argue whether Ellroy's book helped or hurt the public understanding of the real case. On one hand, it kept the story alive. On the other, it deepened the confusion between fact and fabrication. Ask someone today if they think the killer was caught, and they might say yes, because they saw the movie. Oh yes, the movie. In 2006, Brian De Palma directs a big-screen adaptation of The Black Dahlia, starring Josh Hartnett, Scarlett Johansson, and Hilary Swank. The trailer is moody, the lighting is exquisite. The murder, again, is artfully brutal. But the film flops. Critics say it's all surface, no soul. Kind of like what happened to the case itself. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, the real Elizabeth Short becomes a visual shorthand. Her face appears on shirts, posters, even tattoos. That blurry black and white mugshot becomes a kind of logo for vintage tragedy. She's framed in the same way we frame icons like Marilyn Monroe or Betty Page, minus the fame, minus the agency. It's haunting, and not in the way horror movies intend. One particularly strange corner of this mythologizing is the conspiracy theories. They bloom online like mushrooms in a dark basement. People say the case was covered up by the government, that Elizabeth was an informant, that the killer was a studio executive, that the LAPD knew who did it and looked the other way. None of these theories hold water, but they hold attention, which is more valuable in the age of endless scrolling. There's also the theory that Elizabeth was killed in a satanic ritual, another that she was part of a secret society of women who lured men to their deaths, like some kind of gothic Charlie's Angels reboot. Again, no evidence, but plenty of mood boards. The real twist? Los Angeles leans into the myth. Ghost tours include the Dahlia stop as a highlight. You can buy maps of famous murder locations. Some true crime podcasts use Elizabeth's case as a kind of introductory class in Unsolved but Irresistible. And the press, yes, even now, still can't resist a good headline with her name in it. A cold case detective proposes a new suspect? Cue another round of Black Dahlia specials, complete with brooding narration and slow-motion reenactments. The case is no longer just unsolved, it's unresolvable. Because it's not just about facts anymore. It's about what the case represents. A young woman alone in a predatory city, trying to make something of herself, chewed up and discarded by a system that never knew her name, only her story. A quirky detail that often gets buried? Elizabeth once mailed a photo of herself to her mother in Massachusetts, carefully posed, chin tilted up like a starlet. On the back she wrote, Someday you'll see my name in lights. That line has haunted historians for decades, because she was right, just not the way she meant. It's also worth noting that her name is on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, not as a star, but spray-painted as part of an art installation by a guerrilla street artist in the 1990s, a kind of posthumous commentary, a reminder that fame, in Hollywood, isn't always earned. Sometimes it's thrust upon you like a scar. So the Dahlia lives on, not as a case, not really, but as ambiance, as iconography, as the moody wallpaper of American noir. And at the center of all that noise, Elizabeth Short waits, unseen, unheard, transformed from a person into a symbol, and from a symbol into a ghost. The Black Dahlia becomes Hollywood's favorite corpse, not in the grotesque, exploitative way you might expect, well, maybe a little in that way, but in the quiet, persistent way stories become tools. Elizabeth Short's story morphs from tragedy into template. She becomes the go-to visual reference for doomed beauty, the shorthand for every vintage murder mystery where a woman ends up dead for being too pretty, too complicated, or simply too visible. Screenwriters love her. Directors can't help themselves. She haunts plot lines, whispers from behind mirrored bars and faded motel curtains, and nearly every adaptation takes liberties, not just with the details, but with who she was. In one version, she's a seductress, in another, a martyr. Sometimes she's presented as a con artist, sometimes a virgin. She's cast and recast endlessly, with new backstories glued on like wardrobe changes. This constant reimagining starts early. Just a year after her death, the case is adapted loosely for a film called The Naked City. The victim is changed, of course, the location tweaked, but the spirit is unmistakably Dahlia-esque. A pretty young woman, murdered in mysterious fashion, with the camera lingering just long enough on her sadness before the story moves on. By the 1960s, noir revivalists are mining the story for inspiration. You'll find traces of the case in everything from Chinatown to Twin Peaks. Not direct references, but echoes. Cryptic crimes, secrets under the glitz, the idea that behind every sunny palm tree, there's a body cooling in the shade. And Hollywood doesn't stop at movies. The Black Dahlia finds her way into books, stage plays, even music. Bands reference her in lyrics. Painters reimagine her smile. Fashion designers hold shows with Dahlia-inspired collections, black lace, high collars, and just enough morbidity to seem edgy. Historians still argue whether this is tribute or exploitation. Does dressing up tragedy in satin and eyeliner help us understand it, or just bury it deeper under fantasy? A weird detail. In 2017, a video game called L.A. Noire included a storyline based on the Dahlia case. It changed names and rearranged facts, but the vibe was unmistakable. Players could explore digital 1947 Los Angeles, interrogate suspects, and try to solve the unsolvable. It was stylish, immersive, and in some ways deeply unsettling, because solving a murder in game form feels inherently like entertainment, and maybe that's the whole point of how the case has lived on. Elizabeth's death has become not just a cautionary tale, but a marketable aesthetic. Pinterest boards with soft black and white photos of old Hollywood glam, TikTok voiceovers telling her story in 90 seconds with mascara-heavy reenactments. There's even an Instagram filter that mimics Black Dahlia makeup. Red lips, pale skin, a nod to that iconic mugshot. That filter? It's been used over 300,000 times. Meanwhile, true crime content explodes across every platform, and the Black Dahlia is always near the top of every top 10 unsolved murders list. She's become the gateway case for young sleuths in training, a rite of passage for any podcast hoping to find an audience. The details, the drama, the built-in audience, it's irresistible. The phrase Black Dahlia now appears more often than Elizabeth Short. It's what people Google, what they type into YouTube, even what they name their cats, at least 4, according to public pet registries in California. Her real name fades, but her alias gets brighter every year. Still, some attempts to restore her humanity surface. A few biographers have tried to separate the woman from the legend. They sift through letters, photos, interviews with distant relatives. They paint a picture of someone sensitive, anxious, romantic, sometimes reckless, often lost. Someone real. One writer, in a little noticed article from the early 2000s, said, "The tragedy of Elizabeth Short isn't that we don't know who killed her, it's that we stopped caring who she was." It's a haunting line, because it's not just the mystery that keeps people coming back, it's the look of the mystery, the feel of it, the way it's wrapped in black satin and smeared lipstick, served cold on a flickering screen. In countless fictionalized versions, Elizabeth gets some version of closure. The killer is always caught, always punished. The story wraps up with the finality real life refuses to provide. And that, more than anything, shows how badly people want the story to mean something. To end. To be fair. But that's the thing about Hollywood. It loves a clean ending, even when the truth refuses to provide one. A fringe tidbit here. In the early 1990s, an experimental theater company staged a performance art piece based entirely on the Black Dahlia. Audience members walked through a reimagined version of the Selden house, listening to fragmented monologues, stepping over red petals, watching actors deliver half dialogues through bathroom mirrors. The show ended with the audience being asked to write down how they would solve the case, and then burn their answers. That kind of says it all. Hollywood turned Elizabeth into an archetype. The broken angel, the silent muse, the mystery with no mouth. And once you're an archetype, the world stops asking about your actual story. They just use you. So now, decades later, Elizabeth Short walks the tightrope between history and fiction. In movies, she dies beautifully. In music, she's mourned vaguely. In documentaries, she's a case file. But in reality, she was just a woman who never got a second chance to explain herself. The screen fades to black. Roll credits. The real story? Still somewhere offset, waiting.